This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, welcome to our day 20 in our GCP Cloud Architect training. So yesterday we finished our storage component stuffs. So we just started our networking concept. So today we are going to do more explorations and learn more concepts. There was one question yesterday on big table column level security. So was just looking into the documentation, and I had mentioned yesterday, as per my understanding, I don't think so there is something. So I guess it is confirmed. I just looked into the documentation. So if you just go to the documentation here, under this specifically called as security, if I click on security, it shows that you can improve, sorry, you can manage security at the project instance and table level. That's what you can do maximum. uh, Cloud Bigtable does not support row level or column level or cell level security. It is not there. It is still table level. That is the max is what you can do, is what it indicates, and it's from the official documentation. Just sort of sharing it with you. Now let's go to the networking part. Uh, we just understood yesterday what is request for comment 1918 standard is all about. It is basically all about internal IP address or private IP address. And there's going to be only three classes: class A, class B, and class C. Google basically uses class A, so that there's always a hope for more VMs to be provisioned. So that is a key part. And I guess even other cloud providers also may be using class A only for their internal IPs. When they create EC2 instance or virtual machines in Azure, they may use this itself, is my understanding, but I'm not sure. And if you are using a virtual box or a virtual VM player, VMware player, there's a high chance that you are going to use basically, let me get my highlighter. There's a high chance that you are using 192.168 address space. The one which is not heavily used or not very popular is the class B, which is 172.16 address space. So, but during our demo, we'll try to explore this also. So, but the key part is, by now, whenever you look into any IP address, you should be in a position to say whether it is internal IP address or external IP address by just looking at the IP itself. So if you go back to the demo which we did yesterday, using memory store for Redis, it was something like 10.65, something like that. So it's a clear indication it is internal IP address basically. So this is one basic information you need to be having. And as I mentioned, we are going to use this term n number of times throughout networking. Another important thing which I want you to recollect, if you are coming from a computer science background, you would have definitely studied this in your engineering semesters. Even I did it. It was an elective for me. I'm not come from a computer science background, so it was an elective for me. So where you would have learned about computer networks. So one of the important thing is the OSI model, open system interconnection model, which is a important thing to understand how the data propagates till the till it gets converted into zeros and ones to your coaxial cables, till that. So when it comes there, the first layer you always read from the top layer, so layer 7, which is nothing but your application layer. And this is where you use all those protocols like HTTP, HTTPS, DNS, FTP, SSH. All those things comes into picture basically. uh, this is to be called as the smartest layer, layer 7, because it has lots of information using which the routing, distributing the load can happen very easily. And this is the reason why whenever we create load balancer, which we have not seen, we are going to see it in our networking class. We had seen at least a small demonstration in MIG. There it was called as L7 or layer 7. It is because of this OSI model only. So they use the same term there. So this is at the application layer. Then if you go down the ladder, you see something called as presentation layer and session layer, which may not be of that use for a cloud architect. Will not even focus anything on layer 6 or layer 5. That is not our interest itself. Uh, Going down further, we get something called as transport layer, layer 4. Here also in GCP, we are going to focus on few load balancers, which is layer 4. So this is where your TCP, transmission control protocol, or user datagram protocol, the UDP, is going to come into picture. Few things which you are going to address here is basically the port numbers, your MySQL port, your Firestore port, your SSH port, all those things is going to be addressed in this layer, layer 4. And we are going to have a few layer 4 load balancers. I guess one layer 4 load balancer you have in GCP called as a layer 4 load balancer, L4 load balancer. Then you go down the ladder, what you get is your network layer, an important layer. This is where all about your IPv4, IPv6, all those IP address related stuffs are going to be discussed. And anything on VPN, site to site VPN concept, IPsec is going to be also in this layer only. So here, things which we are going to address is the IP address basically. If you go further down, what you get is a data link. This is where your Ethernet, all those comes into picture. The main part, if you wanted to address here, is going to be your MAC address. So every laptop is going to have two address. One is a physical address. The other one is a logical address. The logical address is going to be your IP address, which can keep changing. The physical address is your MAC address, which is not going to change, which is going to be derived from the network interface, the NIC which you purchase. If you have a laptop, you may have a LAN port. If you are having Windows, if you are having Mac, you will never have a LAN port, and that's the reason why MacBook is so slim. You will always have a wireless uh, adapter. So most of the laptops these days will have a wireless adapter. So that's also your NIC basically. So the NIC will be usually having something called as MAC address, media access control. This is going to be a unique address, and it's recommended you don't change the MAC address, but there are options to change it. Uh, and this is your physical address of your machine. And the last layer, if you come, and we may talk a little bit about layer 2 also, Ethernet, all those things in our advanced concepts of networking, which should be next week basically. And the last one is layer 1, where it's basically coaxial cables, fiber optics, all those things. This is the OSI model. So whenever we say layer 7, the one which should visualize, one thing which you should visualize, it's nothing but an application layer, the smartest layer. And if you have a load balancer here, it is also going to become the smartest load balancer. As it goes lower down, it becomes less smarter. Okay, so this is an important thing just for your reference only. If you have studied it and you know it, no problem. But if you have not done it, just a recap. Whenever people say layer 7, this is what they refer to. Another basic information which I wanted to share is Google Workspace, previously called as the erstwhile name of this is called as G Suite. This is nothing but people who have worked on Office 365. Office 365 is provided by Microsoft. What you get here is basically the equivalent of that in Google. So Google also provides a collaborative environment where you can use Google Meet, Google Calendar, Google Docs, and the slide which you are seeing is basically rendered from Google Slides only, so which is equivalent to your PowerPoint, Google Spreadsheet equivalent to your Microsoft Spreadsheet, and OneDrive, which is in your Microsoft, is now called, or in Google, it's called as Google Drive. So you may say, Mahesh, I already have these things even in my Gmail. What you get is a free version of it. For example, if you just go to your Google Drive, just the normal Gmail ID, if you're using, you will get only 15 GB. If you want more, you have to buy separately. But if you buy this option, the collaborative option, this is basically a SaaS, software as a service offer. If you buy this, you get more space. Minimum is what you get is 30 GB. Minimum is 30 GB, and every Google Workspace or G Suite will have these options. Gmail. Now, what do you mean by Gmail provided here? So it's not going to be @Mahesh@gmail.com, but it's going to be Mahesh the company name who has purchased this. So if the company name is my app, Mahesh@myapp.com is going to be the email ID. So the interface, everything looks like Gmail. So, but it's a corporate account, or it's belonging to an organization. So we may use this word G Suite somewhere. Just wanted to explain you that what is G Suite. So if you are already aware of it, no problem. But for people who are not aware of it, just to bring up everybody to the same level, so just thought of sharing it with you. Now let's get into our main part, which is our networking concepts, all those things. And folks, if you are coming from a networking background and if you feel something needs to be added in, please jump in, and you can also add your stuff. A small disclaimer, I'm not from the networking background, so what I have learned is only via GCP. So some of the analogies could be very very basic analogies, so that's how I learned it, by understanding it. So I'm going to put those basic stuffs. If you have something uh, which you feel like this is important to be shared with the team, go ahead and share it. Okay, uh, so with that as the stuff, let's get started with something called as private cloud, virtual private cloud, VPC. What is this VPC all about? So whenever you have a groups of VMs or machines, they should be connected, right? There should be a LAN cable, all those things. At least people who started their career in 2000, all those things, you would have definitely seen. Uh, you go to your office, you connect your LAN cable, and then you would have done it. So I also have done that. So now, if you go to office, you don't do anything. So you directly it connects to your Wi-Fi, to the corporate Wi-Fi, and you start working. So the change which we have seen ourselves in our this thing. So similarly, when it comes to the network part, usually in servers, they I would say they rely still on the network, the LAN connectivity, all those things. So VPC basically provides you a complete networking functionality. What are the parts of a networking functionality? Basically, a network, a sub network, firewall rules, routes, all those things. So it provides you complete set. That is what is called as VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. Now, here, if you don't understand certain terms, what is a subnetwork, what is a route, what is a firewall, don't worry. We are going to discuss that in detail. So this is how things are going to be in on-prem. For example, in on-prem or a traditional virtual private cloud or VPC is going to be something like this, where you have a VPC, say for example, a network. VPC, sometimes people actually, to be very frank, the names provided by AWS, sorry, Azure is always good. The equivalent of VPC in AWS, I'm not sure. In Azure, it is called as VNet, virtual network. That makes most sense, but Google, I don't know why they used VPC. So sometimes if I use VPC or network, both are same. Virtual network, both are same. In AWS, it is called as what is that called as ASW, uh, private virtual cloud. Is that the one? Okay, so but this thing is easier, is what I would say. Azure virtual network. So usually, right, traditional networks work like this. You have a network created, and using that network, you're going to have some VMs provision. Say, for example, in US Central, and you have another VM, another set of network, which is in Singapore, geographically very far, and another VM created. Now there is a VM here in Singapore, there's a VM in US. Now if they were to interact each other, there are two ways of interacting. uh, Basically using internet as the option, meaning they are going to rely on a public IP address, or you need to have some kind of a VPN setup if you were to do it. So this is how they do it, but they cannot interact each other using the internal IP here. They cannot use the internal IP address, the RFC 1918 standard. So they cannot do that. The reason is the VPCs, which is usually created by most of the other cloud providers, are regional in nature. The VPC is to that specific region. That's it. From the outside world, if you were to connect it, you have to use definitely some kind of VPN, uh, virtual private network. So you have to use it. So this is one of the known issues in a traditional virtual private network or VPC. So you have to always use VPN. Now, if there is only 2 regions, you have to have the VPN setup and do it. If 3 regions, one more VPN setup. 4 regions, one more. So it keeps on going. So how many times you are going to have VPN setup? It's going to become a hectic task. Managing it becomes difficult if you were to leverage internal IP communication. But when it comes to GCP, right, it's totally different. It's totally different. The VPC is a global construct, a global resource basically. The same architecture or the same diagram where you have VM in US Central, VM in Singapore, they can simply connect using internal IP address. This is the beauty. And from the outside world, definitely they have to use VPN and then connect it. If there is an on-prem data center, from there, if you were to connect it, you have to use VPN. Don't worry, we are also going to do a demo on cloud VPN, a complete demo, which is going to take around 2 to 3 hours there. So outside world, if they were to connect to a Google network, they have to use VPN, basically. So this is something possible by Google. The only reason is why the VPC is global is it's because Google's network is, I don't know why, folks, anybody heard about the 25th region by any chance? The official page still shows 24. Warsaw. Have you ever heard any news? I have not heard, but the document is also not updated. But we see under VPC it is there. Okay, the reason why Google is able to do this very easily is because of its network, folks. Because of its network. In very, very simple terms, if you have, say, for example, a virtual machine in Mumbai, a virtual machine in US Central, you can see it can be connected from here to here, from here, as if like taking a flight. You take a flight, you have one stop, and from there you go to the specific place. You can do it. Visualize as if like there's a giant LAN cable which connects you from Mumbai or from Singapore directly to US Central, and this wire goes across land, sometimes goes across or under the sea. And when it goes under the sea, there was a video which went viral a few years back where there was a shark in the sea which was trying to cut this optic fiber, and it was not able to cut. So it's also shark proof, basically. A fun fact. So in very, very simple terms, that is a key part. Because of its giant network, one of the largest software defined network of its nature in the entire world or in the entire planet, Google is able to do this. So, and that's where Google relies heavily on internal IP address, that RFC 1918 standard. So on LinkedIn, there was a post for new region. Okay, there was a new post on new region. Okay, was it official, Vivek, or somebody from this thing? So because I
So
don't see.
there was
Yeah.
a one guy, a Kanad Koppa something, I forget his name, who also wrote a book on it, GCP. He's a Polish guy. So
Okay.
he got that
Okay. Because
invitation. Yeah, he posted the image of that invitation card. He wrote a book on it,
oh,
GCP.
Okay, because he's in Poland. That's why he would have got an invite. Okay, okay. So maybe
He's
it
a
is not still there. Still
no, no.
not there. That's why it's officially it's not there. But behind the scene, the team has already done all the work, is what I see. Okay, thank you, Anil. So I did because I was doing the class, so I found it, Anil B. So but still it is 24. But we see Poland or Warsaw is already there. Actually, it is created.
He just posted his invitation card there. Actually, I saw.
Okay. Yeah, you were the one whom we get to know. Okay, thank you. So the network plays a major role, folks. Now, this is not just marketing. And if you see any Google fundamental class, there are lots of Google events which happens. Whenever you see the Googlers show you this one, and this is not some marketing stuff. I can show that this really works. That a VM you create it in Singapore, Mumbai, and geographically very far place, something like in US, you create another VM. I can use the internal IP address and ping it. It will work, is what I wanted to show you in this demonstration. And it's not just marketing. Oh, okay, I know that guy. So it's not marketing. So let's see that in action. So whether this is really true, whether it's really true what you see here, where we see VPC is a global construct, and this is a very unique feature. And let's see how this works. Two VMs geographically separate, how they can communicate. Two ways of communicating. External IP is one option. Internal IP address is another option, which Google provides it very easily. And when it comes to Google, right, you don't need to set up VPN tunnels, folks. It is built in because of its network presence, broad network presence. You can easily do it. In other cloud providers, it may not be possible. They may come up soon, but still not up to the mark like Google. So their VPCs are mostly regional. So other cloud provider, if they were to have the same setup like Google, they have to rely on public internet, set up a VPN, and then do it. But in GCP, you can see it in next 3 minutes maximum. We should have a connectivity set between US and Singapore machine using internal IP address. So let's see how it works. So let me create simple. And in the networking class, right, we are going to learn all our concept by just creating a virtual machine, nothing else. Just creating a virtual machine, and we are going to make it work. Let me see whether I have a template which I can use, because we want to be little smart. Don't want to always create VMs with F1 micro. Let me create a template, folks. VPC template, something like that. Basically, it's going to have F1. N number of times we are going to create it. So I thought, let me just create a template. F1 micro, that should be good enough is what I feel. Yeah, this should be good enough. I can save a couple of clicks there. That's it. So that's the template. We know how template works. In our MIG, we had tried it. Now let's create a VM using a template just to save some time. That's it. So create this. So I'll call this as server SG. That's it. All other things, because of the template it comes. I'm not going to do anything, folks. Just give a name. That's it. Click on create. That's it. Now let me wait for that to come up, and I can create one more, which is in US. US Central. We'll select US Central. So user template. I'll call this as server US. Only change the region and to the zone of your choice inside that region. So A should be good enough. That's it. Just created two VMs. That's it. They will work automatically. The connectivity is going to work automatically. Nothing needs to be done basically. Let's wait for it to come up. I can SSH into my both the machines. Let me SSH. And all our demos in networking is going to be like this only, folks, where we create VMs, simply create VMs and learn most of our concepts in networking. And we know how VMs work. We have spent a good amount of time. So let's wait for the screen to come up, SSH to happen. But before the SSH happens, this is your, let me remove those columns which is of no use for us in use. Okay. Uh, Two servers created, one in Singapore, one in US Central. Geographically, they are very far. This is your internal IP address, class A. The external IP address, anything apart from what we have learned is always the external IP address, simple. And usually what I have seen is the IP address, usually the external IP address which we get from Google is usually coming from a pool. Because IPv4 is limited, so Google has reserved certain external IP address. Usually it's going to be something like in 100 series or 35 and 54 is what I have seen. Sorry, the 34 and 35. These are the usual series which I have seen. If it's AWS, usually it's going to be 50 dot. Usually you can see that the external IP address, because they have reserved certain pools. So it comes from that pool specifically in that region, and you will be using it basically. So that's a background. Now you can also try it if you just ping the external IP address, it's going to work. There's no big deal. You can ping it from your laptop also. It's going to work. Can you try this, folks? This is US Singapore server. The other one is, you may have little, the round trip time may be higher, that's okay, but you should be able to ping it. So if I just go open a terminal and ping it, let me just ping it once. It should work if I'm not wrong. It should work, should not have any issues. It's working. For some people it may be the time would be lesser. For some people it's going to be larger based on their location. That's it. The other IP, if I just copy it, that also works. That also works. Now, if I go back to understand, to make an understanding of what we learned yesterday, the RFC 1918 standard, where we mentioned if you try to use this IP, the backbone is going to the routers, the backbone of the internet is going to immediately discard this. Now try just doing the ping of the internal IP address of Singapore server and ping of US server, and let me know what's the output, folks. Are you able to reach it? Are you able to reach it? If I ping US, it's going to show me something like this. Not reachable, timeout. Yes, timeout is going to happen. So this is a very clear indication. If you use something like this, the routers are not going to even allow you. It's going to discard it directly. It's going to not even allow you to reach it. So security is going to come slowly into here. So if I just create a VM, if I just create a VM and external IP address is easily accessible, internal is not even accessible. So a small piece which will become very vast or massive when we finish the networking class. Now that's good. Then you may say, Mahesh, then only external IP address is useful. What is the use of internal IP address? I cannot even connect from my local machine. So the thing which going to work is basically we can do that. We'll slowly do that part. How from my external, from my laptop, how I can use my internal IP address. There are options. I will show you that at a later point of time. Now what we'll see is between these two servers, forget about the laptop, or if you see here, The question is not from on-premise. So our laptops are going to be something like on-prem. So not our laptops connecting to these VMs internally. That's a secondary question. The first question, can these VMs, they are in the same cloud at least, can they communicate each other? That is a key part, which is not possible in a traditional VPC. But when it comes to Google's VPC or GCP's VPC, they can communicate it. Let's see whether it really works or it is just a marketing stuff. Let's see that by doing a simple command, ping. I guess everybody would have used ping to check whether your internet is working or not. So that's what we are going to use here also. So if you are in a Linux machine, you can get the IP address. Yeah, this should be good enough is what I say. So get the IP address, or you can get the IP address from the uh, basically from your GCP console. Either way, you should be able to get the IP address. So the IP address which you see for US, this is US server. US is on my right hand side. Singapore is on my left hand side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ping. Simple, nothing else. No setup of VPN or anything. Ping the US server, which is 10.128.0.3. I keep it ready. Similarly, I do ping the IP address. You can see it here, folks. This is the IP address, which is same as what has been shown in your console. So 10.148.0.5. And let's hit enter and see whether it works. It works, folks. It works like a charm. So straight away, without any setup, VPN or anything, it works. So what is mentioned in the slide, what usually all the Googlers talk, is really something reality. It works, and it's not a marketing gimmick or anything. I've seen few organizations who do this kind of gimmick, but at least in Google, it is not. At least with the networking part, what you have heard is always something which you can also try it out. And if you ask the same thing, can this be done in AWS? Can this be done in Azure, folks? Anybody with the Azure background, or GCP or AWS background, have you ever tried this kind of a concept? Has it worked? Is it possible? Any thoughts, folks? I may need your thoughts here because for my understanding, no is my understanding. Anybody ever tried this? VM in US Central. VM in every cloud provider have a region in US. They have a region in what? Region in Singapore. Possible. Have anybody tried it? Anybody with AWS background tried it, or Azure background tried it? Per my understanding, it's no. And I have one official documentation. You can go to the bookmarks. Module 5, and if you see, you will see an official documentation which was last updated on October 2020. This is from Microsoft. So configure a VNet, virtual network to virtual network. So a VM in if you have a network in US East and you have another network in US West, all in US only, if they still were to connect it, these are Azure VNets. If they were to connect, you have to have VPN. It's a clear indication. It's not me saying, it's the official documentation saying it is not possible, at least in Azure. I was not able to get a documentation from AWS, but my understanding when I started exploring, there was a document, something very similar. Now they have removed it. I'm not able to find that document. My understanding is it is the same. So very basic stuff, you cannot do it. Now, if you take this kind of an option, for every time, for every VNet, I have to create a VPN means how many VPNs I'm going to create? It's going to be an overhead is what I would say. Which is totally being removed in GCP. All credit goes to the global network. So is this part clear, folks? About the VPC, about the VPC, the network which you create, how it is something very handy. You can have, maybe you can treat this as a very simple example, where there is a person who's working in, there's a server, production server or something of that sort, which is in US, and there's a person who's working in some parts of Asia, something like Taiwan, Singapore, or any parts of this place, or Mumbai. They wanted to connect it, but they want to use internal IP. We can do that very easily in GCP. That is what it indicates, which is very, very unique. Now, I wanted to make you further think. So ping worked. Awesome. That was good. Now, I wanted to show you whether this is really a blessing or it is a curse. Let's verify that. So to do that, let me gen again one more time SSH into it. So I'm going to have a screen which is back to back. We'll just SSH it once more. So get the IP address. Similarly, IP address. So now what I will do, we know ping works. It works. It is very clear. So if I use ping, it works. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH. That's the question. So that is the next question doing Mangesh. So I'm going to SSH from Singapore server. I'm going to SSH into it. So 10.228.0.3. This is what you see. This is what you see. Now you see the prompt. I am in server-sg. Now if I do SSH, what's going to happen? Let's see. I'm there. I'm there. So without me sharing any keys, nothing, it has worked. So you can see it by yourself. I was in server SG. Now I come to server US. Now if I just type who here, it's going to show two connections are there. Two connections are there. One is directly coming from my external IP address. Second, coming from the internal IP address from my Singapore machine. This is my Singapore machine, right? Ending with 5. You see two connections. So I can SSH. Now, slightly the benefit which you saw looks like, is it really a feature which Google is providing? I'm not doing anything. Just create two VMs in two different geographical location, and I can even SSH. Now people think whether this is really a feature or a backdoor or security loophole. What's your thoughts, folks? Is it going to be a security loophole, or is it really a bug, or is it something a feature? Maybe we are understanding it wrongly. What's your thoughts? Yes, we'll come to that. What is egress? All those things. Yeah, that's going to save it to some great extent. What's your thoughts, folks? Do you feel this is like a security loophole? And it's not only from US. You can also do the same thing from Singapore also. SSH. I do the Singapore one 10.148.0.5. I should be able to also SSH into the other machine also. I'm there. I'm there. Okay, there's a good thoughts. Let me read out each one's thoughts here. Some of you think it is a security loop, but different region. No, it's a feature is what few of you say. Global network. I think on-prem to GCP needs a shared keys. We'll see that. We'll see that, Mangesh. So is it a security loophole or is it a feature? Let's verify it. For same thing on the other cloud needs to pay more egress cost, possibly, yeah, because you have I've not tried, but per my understanding, it is not there as per the documentation, at least is what my understanding is. Now, let me just close this. The reason why this worked and how long it took the demo to do with the slowness which I do, it came to around 10-15 minutes. We were able to do this. The entire reason why this worked is because of one simple feature. If I click on the columns, and I would always suggest if the UI team of Google or the console can make this column default turned on. There's a column called as network or VPC. So it is because of this one things are working so seamless for us. We know Google, whenever we create a compute engine API, first time it creates a network by automatically. That network name or that VPC name is called as default, because this VM, these two VMs are in the same VPC or same network. It's not sub network, folks. They are in the same network or VPC. The ping is working, SSH is working, anything more also can work. Even if it's Windows to Windows machine, I can also do RDP using internal IP address. It is possible. The credit is all because of this default VPC. Now let's explore what is this default VPC all about by just going inside network. Under networking, you see VPC. If I click on this, you see this VPC, which is already created for us when we created the project first time. If you just explore this one, there were two reasons actually why it worked. First of all, in the beginning itself, I have made this statement like, if there's no VPC, there is no cloud, or if there's no network, there's no cloud, right? So why VM got created? Because there was a sub network. So this is your network, the top node. The second details which you see is these are your sub network or subnet. Both are same. So there is a sub network for each region. So currently, if you see 25 subnetworks are there because 25 regions are there. So any VM which you create in US is going to have this range, IP address range 10.128.0 slash something. So the first 20 bits are going to be reserved by the network. Remaining 12 bits are going to be allowable for your VMs. So if I create something in Singapore, the Singapore's machine is always going to be 10.128.0. Want to verify it? Just verify this by just going into the compute engine screen. So the reason why I'm showing you this part is, who knows, there may be a software which needs to be provisioned. And if the software runs based on a specific IP address, there are certain proprietary softwares which works based on a specific licensing model. Some software works on a MAC address. The MAC address should be matching, only then it works. Some softwares will work if the IP address is only this, it's going to work. I have worked on both the kind of softwares in my past experience. So if they say the IP address should be specifically like this, I can make sure the IP address when I provision is matching the license. So you see US Central 110.128. If you just go US Central 10.128.0.3. Similarly, Singapore, if you see 10.148. This thing. So that is what you see. Now it is because of this network it worked. And it's not only because of this network, there's one more thing. Two machines needs to interact each other, meaning basically there should be some kind of a firewall rule. So there's also a firewall rule which the default VPC creates. It's because of this firewall rule we were able to do it. So the one which made us to ping both the system was because of this firewall rule called as default allow ICMP. What is ICMP? It's an acronym that stands for Internet Control Message Protocol, if I'm not wrong. Basically, in simple terms, for a ping command to work, you should have it. So it is because of this it worked. The ping worked. and the SSH, which looked little scary for some of us, it is because of this one. SSH port is by default 22. That port is open. So maybe I can just remove certain columns here. Priority filter is required. Type, target, action, network, insights. I don't need it. Okay. If I see something like this, and we did not do anything, folks, we have never even touched our networking stuffs. So because of this SSH, the SSH was able to work. And because of this firewall rule, the ping worked. 0.0.0.0/0 is anywhere from the world. Anybody or everyone in the world can connect if they know the IP address, if they know the credentials, basically, is what it indicates. So basically, it is not a bug or not a security loophole, but it is a feature or something which is turned on by default. Now you may say, is it a good practice to open to the entire world? I would say definitely not a good practice. But why did Google do it? So why did Google do it? Simple answer is to onboard you people to cloud very quickly. Now, for example, for an instance, if you take, if Google did not create default VPC in the project, first activity, everybody who learn a cloud, they'll create a VM. But when you're creating a VM, basically, if it had thrown an error, VPC is not there, subnetwork is not there, please create it. You create a subnetwork, and you may not even know that subnetwork, how to create it. So somehow after Googling all those things, if you create it, and if you try to SSH, the firewall rule is not there. If it shares, you'll get pissed off. You'll never even go create a virtual machine there in that cloud. So just to make your onboarding experience good, Google has created a default VPC, and this is only for learning purpose, folks. This default VPC is only for learning purpose. The best way when you do a real implementation is never ever use default VPC. There are few reasons which we will slowly capture why you should not use it. The first and the foremost reason which I would say is uh, the firewall rule. It's too much open. It's very broad. Anybody can ping it. Anybody can SSH if they know the credentials. Anybody can RDP into it if it's a Windows machine. And there's something which is used internally. So let's ignore that. So it is pretty open. Now you may say people who have worked on GCP to some extent, this is possible to edit. We can change this. Possible. You can edit it. That is okay. That's one reason. So the firewall rules are little broad. That's the reason why I should avoid default VPC. Uh, Second reason why we should avoid default VPC. Anybody wants to think of it? The answer is on the screen itself. The answer is on the screen. Why you should avoid it? I have told why Google provided it. Looks like a security loophole, but it's not a loophole, but it's just to make you quickly learn GCP. And I told in production, you should not use default VPC. One is the firewall rule. Any other reason which you can think why you should not use default VPC? Vivek got it correctly. Anybody else? I want you to think here, folks. We are okay to spend a minute or two here to understand why you should not use default VPC. I want to hear it from by your thoughts. Just a minute. Hope I'm able to hear you people. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. By any chance, anybody talking? 1 minute. Okay, it has frozen. My system has frozen. 1 minute, folks. Sure. Is anybody talking? No. If you talk, I should be able to hear it. I don't know what was my setting which I did. Okay. Uh, okay. Anyway, we are getting close to the break time, so I'll fix my system later. Okay. So why should you not use this? So what Vivek mentions is lots of subnetworks. We plan our subnetworks. Aman mentions IP and network class. Okay. All regions have subnetworks. No restriction in IP address is what Anil B mentions. Anil Kumar mentions subnetwork size is small. Okay. Those are the reasons. All are valid reasons. Now, let me add few more things to this. Now, just think as a customer, folks. Think as a customer. Um, Basically, what is this going to make? If I create a VM in any of the 25 regions in GCP, I can easily ping them, SSH, I can do everything, basically, is what it indicates. Now, will the customer have a presence in all 25 regions? First of all, uh, no, right? So basically, if you think from a customer perspective, if you keep so many sub networks, what is this happening? You're keeping backdoors. So maybe the customer is only focused on Asian market. The customer does not even have a presence in Europe or in US Central. Then why should you have those regions open? So you're going to invite troubles only when you are using default VPC. So the number of sub networks are more. And tomorrow, right? Um, Today, like we have Warsaw. So if I just go down, we have Warsaw or Poland in Poland. So this is the IP. Tomorrow, if something comes, the next range is going to be automatically added. They will never even inform you. They, in the sense, Google, if you have turned on default VPC, the next IP address was going to be 10.180 190.0.0/20. That is going to be the IP address for the new 26th region. We are talking futuristic. So that's going to be the stuff. So they're going to keep on adding the sub networks. So this is only for onboarding purpose. So if the customer does not have a presence in that region, block it. Don't even have a VPC. That is the first reason. The second reason, as some of you mentioned, the class is fixed. It's always class A. Maybe my requirement is not this much. I don't want class A for some reason. What could be one of the reasons I should avoid class A is maybe I may tomorrow have a on-prem and GCP communication to be established. So when two VMs communicate, the basic important stuff is IP is not conflicting or there's no overlap of IP. So if on-prem also uses the same range, unfortunately, you will have a conflict. Two networks cannot have the same IP. The overlap cannot happen. So if the IPs are overlapping, so on-prem I cannot go and say, oh no, I want to connect with GCP, please change your on-prem IP. Nobody is going to do. They'll say, please, we are okay to discard this cloud. We will use some other cloud provider. We cannot change our on-prem because on-prem would be working for ages, right? Now all of a sudden you just say we just want to communicate, change your on-prem stuff. It's not going to work. So what you can change is you can change your IP or the class. Instead of class A, make it as something like class B or class C, or in class A itself, look at the IP which does not have a conflict. So IPs are fixed. So the communication could be a problem. Uh, Too much subnetworks, which may be really a backdoor. That's another reason which you can avoid. Subnetwork is small is what I see. So if it is /20, basically you can address up to what? 400 and 4096 IPs. 2 power 12 if you do, it's going to be 400 and 4096. If you want, you can increase it. There's a possibility you can increase it, making it /16 or even /8. You can do that. That is possible. You can do that. So a couple of reasons which we have found out. Let me add that in the cheat sheet uh, under the implementation part, real implementation part. Avoid default VPC because of more subnet, uh, which will basically invite troubles if customer is not having having a presence in that region. Second, firewall rules are very broad, open to the world. 0.0.0. This is another reason. Should be only used for is only used for quick onboarding for learning purpose. So and this is something which we will be using as an important activity when you get an opportunity to create a project, brand new project in real implementation. The first and the foremost thing which you should do is either delete the default VPC manually or have an IAM policy, organization policy, which can disable this, So you have to have this. So I'll show you how to do that. So basically, so two reasons is what we have found so far. Anything else which you can think, subnetwork size small, I can definitely make it. IP restriction. All always. And if you also go look into your GCP project, your default VPC is going to be the same stuff. It's going to be hard coded. The range is going to be same for every default VPC. Always our IP range is it's class A IP range, which may have an IP overlap with another network if we connect two networks. These as long as we don't connect, we have no problem. The moment we connect two, we want to have a connectivity established, then we'll have an IP overlap if with another network if we connect these two networks. This is another reason why you should do two networks. So meaning what it indicates is the best practice is avoid this one and directly delete it. Or there is an organization policy called as skip default VPC, which you can use so that new projects which you create under your organization node, you will never have it. So deleting is very easy. So for example, if I just go first delete these VMs. If a VM is running, I cannot delete a VPC. Please remember it. If a VM is running, it's like a parent, the parent and a child. So there's a connectivity there. So if a VM is running, you cannot delete your VPC. So let me just delete my VMs. VMs deleted. Now what I'll do is, I don't want this. So what I'll do, click on my default VPC, delete it. So when I delete it, it's going to delete my subnetworks, my routes, which we have not even explored, and the firewall rules. So it's going to clean up everything. Unless no resource in GCP is depending on it. So it looks like there is some dependency. This is a bug. This is from yesterday it is coming. Region not selected, present. Oh, this is could be because of, I understood. Let me try deleting it. If it again comes, it could be because of Warsaw. Let me just try it. Dismiss. Let me just only delete this subnetwork. Okay, I cannot delete it. This is another important stuff. So if you say I want to use default VPC only, but my company or the customer works only in US Central, nowhere else. Please delete all the other subnetworks. If you try deleting Belgium, click, you get a message like this. Subnetworks in auto mode. What is this auto mode? This is one of the modes in which the VPC and the subnetwork is going to be created. So if you have it in auto mode, basically you cannot delete it. So you cannot delete individual subnetworks if it is created in auto mode. This is the mode, folks. We'll talk more about that after we come back from break. This is one of the mode. The other mode is custom VPC. The other mode is custom VPC. So if, and you cannot delete your, we cannot delete individual subnet in default VPC. In default VPC. That is also a problem. So basically, the key part is I'm not able to delete it. I don't know what could be the reason. From yesterday, I'm seeing the same problem. So either it's a temporary solution. It's a bug is what I feel. I have deleted it even in our class itself. When we were using App Engine, we had deleted it. So maybe the only issue which I feel is looking at it. Region not present in the self link, something Java exception is showing. So maybe what we will do is once we come back from the break, we'll try deleting this default VPC from our command line and see whether it can work. Or maybe why don't we launch now only and try it. We'll give a try because it does not look like some specific error, some Java lang. So, and this looks like something related to Warsaw is my understanding. Let's give a try. Delete it. So the UI did not help. So plan B is going to use the command line. So gcloud compute networks delete default -q. Let me see whether it works at least this time in the UI, in the terminal, this thing. If it deletes, good. If it does not delete, okay, what is this? Is already used by the network is already used by a firewall rule. Okay, I will delete the firewall rule. Let me see what's going to happen. So I'll delete all the firewall rules. Previously, they used to delete everything together. Let's see, deleting this firewall rule helps us. Firewall rules deleted. Can I delete the VPC? Because if you see, deleting the VPC also deletes subnetwork, routes, firewall, they mention it. But maybe they are not able to do recursively. Not sure what happened. But in the UI, it shows the same error. Let me try it in the command line. So the error in the command line and the error in the UI is totally different. So now let me try this, seeing what can happen. If it works, command line rocks. Simple. Let's wait. So this is one way, a little manual way. What is this? Is already used by global resource default IP range. It's going into something new. So let me see whether there's anything like this. I'm just trying to delete as per the best practice, avoid it because it's broad. Only if it is there, people will use it. So I thought, let me just delete it. But deleting is creating problems. We need to delete those instances before deleting the default. We have already deleted it, Anil. So we don't have any instance. We don't have any instance there. It's already deleted. Okay, I think maybe there's a new thing. It's because of our Cloud SQL instance when we did. So Cloud SQL instance when we did, I was also not able to do. So Cloud SQL instance when we created, right? It created certain peering information. So it could be because of that. Let me try deleting it. Remember, we created a Cloud SQL instance with internal IP address. So behind the scene, it created a networking stuff called as peering. It could be because of that. Let me clean it up and see. But I feel we may not be able to delete it, but let's give a try. Cleaning up the entire stuff and seeing whether we can remove it. So this is deleted. Another entry, something related to networking, so which is in the default VPC only. Everything is in the default VPC. So try deleting it. I remember I was not able to delete it, but once we can give a try one more time. Okay, so sub networks there are. Can I delete it? I cannot. Internal IP, is there anything? No. Firewall policy? No. Firewall rules? No. Routes, there are going to be few routes. We will delete it later. Private VPC now. Okay, there is something. Let me just release this. This is the one. If you see, right, this was the one which was showing the error. So if you see here, global address default IP range, this was the same thing which was showing. So it was something related to our Cloud SQL instance private IP when we did. So let's just remove this. Released, that's good. Anything else which we have? No. Let's give a try this time whether it's going to work. Last time it told firewall, we removed. Now it showed something called as extra default IP address, we removed that. Let's see what's the next error is going to show. It could be related to route is my understanding. If it gets deleted, awesome. That's going to be good. If it does not get deleted, we have to just leave it. That's it. Longer time is an indication it may not work, but let's keep our fingers crossed and see whether it's going to work. This could be a typical use case also where somebody already designed certain stuffs using all default VPC. Awesome. We were able to delete it. We were able to delete it with little of glitches, but we were able to delete it. Now, if I go to my VPC, nothing should be there. Nothing should be there. So what we are going to do is now we are going to take a break, come back. The magic which was working with default VPC and the loopholes which was there in default VPC firewall rule, we are going to mitigate both and create ourselves the same magic which worked. Two VMs, one in Singapore, one in US Central, how it worked. So we'll try to do the same thing, but everything from the scratch ourselves, not using any single help of a pre-built feature like default VPC. That's what we are going to do. So we are going to build a new VPC ourselves and see how it's going to work. Okay, so let's take a break, come back and explore that interesting feature. Take a break and come back.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so before the break, we saw the use of default VPC and when should you use it, when not to use it. When you are onboarding a team for learning GCP, the default VPC could be helpful. But when you're doing a real implementation, default VPC should be deleted. We try to delete it. So this had some glitches. So we had some glitches. Now, what's a better way? You can put an organization policy. So for that, you need to have an organization. So if I am using basically my free tier account, I don't have an organization. So it's going to show no organization. It should have an organization node, something like this. Then only you can do it. But without an organization node, you can see the various policies, organization policies in place. So it is not that mandatory that you should have it, but you can at least see your organization policies. To apply it, you need to have an organization node. Let me just show you. The second option which we are seeing is, why to have a VPC, then go and delete it, or do all this kind of circus, look into the details and then delete it. In the beginning itself, disable it. How do we do it? It is with the help of a policy called as, go to your IAM and admin, organization policy. And there are around 56 organization policies available. Now, if I just go and search for something called as skip, it's going to show me a policy, folks. Skip default VM creation. So if I click on this details further, it's going to throw me a message saying that you have to do this kind of stuff only under an organization. So only inside the organization is what you can do all those things. You are more outside of an organization. Something like, currently this project is like more like a freelancer person. So only if you are part of an organization, some policies applies to you. For a freelancer, may not be, basically. So let me just show you in a project where I have a organization node. So I have an org node like this. Learn GCP with Mahesh.tech. I just, to have an org node, you just need to have a domain. I got this domain only for 75 Indian rupees. It was in an offer, so I got this. So I thought I will use this only for this purpose. So I have an org node, so definitely I can apply policies. So if I just go change this to my org node and go to my IAM organization policies. So search for skip here. You see this? Now when I click on it, because I have an org node, it's going to show me the details. This Boolean constraint skips the creation of default network and related resource during the Google project resource creation. This where this constraint is set by true, set to if it is set to true. Now I have clicked on enforce. By default, it will not be enforced. It's going to be usually off. If I enforce it, what's going to happen, basically, you are not going to have a VM, any VM if you create. So first of all, so any new projects which you created, it's going to not have a default VPC created. So by default, it's going to be off. You have to make this as on. So by doing this, any new VMs, any new projects which you create will not have default VPC creation. So it's always better to turn off the VPC creation at an org level so that you don't need to do this extra circus. So I can just give you one real incident with this part. So when I was working in a service-based organization, so the resource was created using a configuration management tool called as Terraform, which is very, very popular entire project. Now we were never doing anything via hand. Everything was created using Terraform, right from project creation, enabling the building, enabling the APIs, then creating resources like Kubernetes cluster and all. It was 2 years story, back story, if I'm not wrong. So in this, what was happening is, when we create a compute engine API, right, what was happening was, it was automatically creating default VPC. And they had a monitoring tool which was monitoring how the resources are provisioned. Is there any firewall rule which is open to the world? So there is a tool called as from something called as Prism, Red Prism, Redlock Prism, or something like that. There's a product which was a this one, Redlock Prism, something. This one, this is the one. Yeah, from Palo Alto. So this one, they, what they were doing is, they had used that, the customer was using this. So this used to scan the entire network, and it used to immediately send out a mail. basically saying that somebody created a firewall rule which is open to the world. So the problem was this one. Let me just show you this. So everything was using Terraform. We will touch upon this at a very high level during our module 7, module 8, sorry. So what we were doing was basically entire stuff, create project, enable billing, then enable API. And one of the APIs was definitely Compute Engine API. We had to enable this because there was Kubernetes engine. So the moment I enable this via Terraform, what was happening was default VPC was getting created. We have seen this, right? In our first day's class itself, when we enabled it, default VPC gets created. If default VPC gets created, the default firewall rules also get created. And that one of the firewall rule is open to the world, 0.0.0.0. This was getting created. Now this will immediately be scanned by that Redlock Prisma tool from Palo Alto, and it used to send out a mail to senior management saying that somebody opened a firewall rule like this. It's a breach. Then in the next few minutes it's going to go off, but because this was a customer, they used to send out a mail, and I was working in offshore, so they used to send out a mail saying that why did you create it. We had to explain them saying that this is a script, and whenever you enable this API, it's going to create it. This is the default behavior. To avoid this, go to your org node, skip default VPC, turn it off, or enforce it is what we mentioned. N number of times we mentioned, because that guy was not understanding it. So we used to always have this. So we had to have a standard email to always send this. And at that time, the Terraform version which I was using was something like something of this sort, 11 version. It did not have this option to immediately delete this thing. So we had to add an extra script to delete the default VPC. Sometimes the awareness is important. Sometimes the other side, the customer place, there would be some people like this where they will not understand GCP. So sometimes educating them could be important. Even if we educate, they are not ready to take. So you may face such problems, folks. So I had faced this very severely, and there was lots of escalations. But we had, and when I explained it to our organization, to my manager, he was able to understand it, but the customer was not able to understand. And I had also created a video only because of this in my YouTube channel. So saying that this is possible, but they were not doing that basically. So some features, and if they are coming from a different cloud background, they may not be able to get this very easily. So this was some real problem which I faced, which could have been done so easily. So to do this in Terraform, it took me some time to do it, but it could have been done so easily by just on one organization policy, which the customer was not ready to do. So, and it was a really good feature only. So it was nothing which is beneficial to us. So you may see something like that. So if I just go back, so that our policy is going to play a major role, folks. So keep in mind, this is going to be a good choice. So I'm going to make it as a point here. Delete, okay, best best practice. Best practice is to either delete the existing default VPC, or have a, and this is in the implementation stuff, folks, not from the exam perspective, or have skip default VPC org policy, organization policy, policy enforced. Enforced. Either do either one of them. This is preferred because it works for all the projects, futuristic projects. Preferred because this works for all futuristic project. Hope my future projects. And this does not work retrospectively, folks. The organization policies never work retrospectively, meaning if there's a project which is already having default VPC, it's not going to go delete it. Any new projects which you create, it's going to apply it. Please remember that. Okay. So we now know an option which can be made helpful. But for now, because we don't have an organization node, we have manually deleted it. So far, so good. Now, coming back to the actual stuff, the same magic. US to Singapore, ping should work like a charm, but SSH should not work. Something like that is what we are going to do. So for that, you need to create your own VPC. We are almost a good amount of discussion why to avoid default VPC. Now let's create our own VPC. So click on create VPC. Before I click on create VPC, wanted to emphasize one more time. If your project does not have a network, you cannot create VMs. You cannot create Kubernetes cluster, but you can create App Engine standard. You can create cloud functions. You can create Cloud Run. This should be very clear. There's one question from Mangesh. Is it applicable to individual accounts, right, or only to organization account? You should have an organization node. So it's nothing to do with the account. Basically, if you have an organization node, you can apply this policy. The moment you apply this policy, whether you are a owner of the project or anything, you will not be able to create a VPC. What is that? If you have turned this on, by default, the VPC will not be enabled. You can manually go and turn it on, manually go and create a default VPC. But when you create a new project, the VPC will not be created. This applies at an organization level, meaning below the organization, any projects which you create, it's going to be applicable there for anybody, for anybody. So without a network, if I just without a default VPC, can we create a Cloud Run? Without default VPC, we can create Cloud Run. Is that correct? Yes, this is what I mentioned. So that's what I'm going to show you now. So we had done this demo for our App Engine standard and flexible. So I am in my default, my batch 6. Let me create a project, sorry, VM. There's no VPC. If there's no VPC, there's no firewall rule. So if I just leave everything as default, simply click on create, it's going to throw me an error. The following tabs have error. What is that? Networking tab has an error. If I click on networking, it's going to show you don't have a network itself. I cannot even create a VM without a network. But if I go to my cloud function, the easiest one which I can do, if I go to cloud function, which is serverless, App Engine standard specifically, Cloud Run, and cloud functions can be created because these are serverless products. So they will be able to create. They don't even rely on this network. So if I create quickly cloud functions with all default settings, next, just leave everything as default. It should get created. It should get created. There's a video in my channel. If you search no network, you should be able to get that video. So if I just go there, by the time this gets created, uh, so if you search basically no network, this is the one. So it's around 30 minutes or 24 minutes. If you are interested, you can look into this. It was created an year back, so the products which was there at that time I would have mentioned. So Cloud Run was not there, so I would not have mentioned it. So what product requires VPC, what product does not require VPC is what I would have discussed. So cloud function is created. Want to see it whether it's really working? Go click on the trigger and you should be able to see the output. So if I click on trigger, there's going to be a URL. It's going to show me something like hello world or something. That's it. So cloud function works. Cloud run works. App engine standard specifically works because these are all serverless product. Hope that concept is clear, folks. What requires VPC, what does not require VPC. This could be a important point. For example, if you're going to work for an organization which is a startup and they don't have any networking stuffs, I would say don't even get into the networking part. Just only position only serverless products or cloud native products. You don't need to even think about networking. The networking will only come when you work for an enterprise where they have an on-prem GCP or a customer who has an on-prem to GCP migration. Only then networking comes into picture. Okay, so two different stuffs which you need to be aware. So uh, now let me create the VPC. I'll keep the screen ready. Let me create a VPC from the scratch. So give a name. So let's give it as batch 6 custom or batch 6 VPC. Let's give it as batch 6 VPC. That's the name of my VPC. The description, as I mentioned, always mention the description. This is going to be helpful when you're leaving the organization. So if you were to give a KT or anything, so you can just say, look at the description. I have done everything. So it's going to make your life simple. Uh, Subnetworks lets you create your own private topology, cloud topology with Google Cloud. Click automatic to create subnetwork in each region if it's automatic. Custom to manually define the subnetworks. So if I make it as auto or automatic, this is what was happening, folks. So what was literally happening when you click on Compute Engine API, enable it, what it was doing basically was it was creating a VPC like this. Default with all the 25 regions. You may not see all the 25. There is an issue in the UI actually. It is only going to show only 15. There's a issue, a known issue in the UI. It's going to show all the things and you will see the CIDR range, folks. This is fixed. Whether you create it, I create it. Whenever you create a automatic subnetwork, it's going to have the same IP. It's hard coded. You cannot change it. You cannot change it. Plus, you're also going to get, whenever you do the default VPC, that is in auto mode, you'll get 25 subnetworks as of today. So if you look into the recordings later, maybe 1 year down the line, it could be 26. It keeps changing. So it's going to be the number of regions that many subnetworks is going to create. Plus, it's going to also create 6 firewall rules. 6 firewall rules. One of the firewall rule which we saw was port 22, port 3389, which is Windows RDP, and the ping. And another one which is used internally, so let's not even worry about it. So these are the 4 firewall rules which, if you want, you can turn it on, which was turned on by Google when we were seeing the default VPC. Or if you don't do it, there's going to be 2 firewall rules which is always going to be enabled, and you will not see a checkbox for it. Meaning, these are called as implicit firewall rule. What do you mean by implicit firewall rule? Meaning, if you just create a VPC with a subnetwork, minimum one subnetwork, uh, or even if you don't have a subnetwork also, the firewall rule, there's going to be 2 firewall rules. One is called as deny all incoming traffic. So what do you mean by ingress? It's a incoming traffic to your VM. And firewall rules are only for VMs, folks, nothing else. Simple. I apply firewall rules only for VMs, nothing else. I don't apply firewall rules for anything else. So allow all egress traffic. What is egress? Egress stands for outgoing traffic. From your VM, you can send any outgoing traffic. But anybody coming into your VM, SSH, for example, it's an incoming traffic to your VM. From your VM, if you do something like ping google.com, it's an outgoing traffic. So incoming traffic is denied. Outgoing traffic is allowed. So this is something like simple example. If you take a house, will not allow any strangers all of a sudden, but we can go outside easily. Basically, that is the kind of a stuff. So normal human tendency, it is the same thing. So by default, uh, no incoming traffic is going to be allowed. Now this could be a very important question in the exam. Possibilities are there. Something on this, I also got it in my recertification. So whenever you have a VPC, there are two firewall rules always created: deny and allow. Then you may ask, then how it was working, Mahesh? Basically, they had overridden it with a concept called as priority. So higher the number, the the lowest priority which you can have is 65535. I don't know why Google did it. It's little confusing. Higher the number, lower is the priority. So lowest priority which you can have is 65535. Now what they do is you lower your priority. You lower the number means higher is the priority. So what they have done is they have few firewall rules. Like if you see 65534, which is less than this number, meaning higher the priority. So by overriding it, you can allow SSH, ping, RDP, all those things. So it's basically with the help of the priority, you have new firewall rules created. Okay, so there are two firewall rules which is always going to be there for any VPC which you create. So going forward, if you create a VPC and you are not able to connect to a VM, possibly it is because you have not created a firewall rule, because there is an implicit firewall rule which will deny your SSH to that VM. That is the main reason. Okay, is this part clear, folks? I'm just going to add this in the cheat sheet, but just wanted to know about those two implicit firewall rules which you will always have in any VPC which you create in GCP. So this could be, sometimes people take, I took almost like when I was learning, took me 1 hour to see what I made as a mistake. It was because of implicit firewall rule or implied firewall rule. Any questions on this, folks?
So, Mesh, can we say that whenever you're creating a your own VPC, then you should allow automatically uh, outbound and inbound traffic?
No, no, allow only outbound. Inbound is blocked. That is what it indicates. You see this: incoming, ingress, deny. Anywhere
Oh,
from the
deny.
world, it's going to
Sorry.
deny.
I missed that point. I thought that was allowed. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So let's just add this word ingress or incoming. These are all same. Or inbound. All are same. Different people use different terms. So, and whenever you use these terms, right, you should have some reference. What is incoming to what? So the reference point is always your VM. So stand on your VM and see what is coming to you, what is going out of the VM. So if you stand on the VM, basically keep it as a reference. Incoming traffic is going to be called as ingress. From the VM, if it is going out, it is going to be egress. So reference point is VM. So this may look very basic for people with networking, but for non-networking people, it may look like really helpful stuffs. So inbound, ingress, all those things are to the VM, traffic to the VM. Then why this thing is not coming? Okay, I don't know why. Okay, I'll fix that. Egress. And to be very frank, when I was learning GCP for the first time, this word was so confusing. Egress, outgoing, or outbound traffic from the VM. This is traffic to the VM. denied by implicit or implied firewall rule. And this is allowed by this thing. Very, very important rule, folks. The question could be somewhat, you should be knowing that this is existing. So what should you do basically? So they will assume that this is there because it's going to be there. So you should make a judgment what should be the best option there. So this is going to be implied basically. So that's on your firewall. More on firewall rules, we'll do it. So just wanted to give you that thought. When you use default VPC, what would have been done is something like this only. So it would have been something like this with those 2 or 4. Totally, you are going to have 6 firewall rules. 6 firewall rules, of which 2 you cannot even disable it. You can only override it with the help of a priority. More on firewall rules once we create our VPC and all, we'll do it. So now let me go back. This is when you do automatic. These are all the stuffs which comes in automatic. So when you do in custom mode, I'll call this as a different name, batch 6 VPC. Maybe just to indicate that it is custom, I can add a word custom and assume the customer is only present in Singapore, London, and US Central. Customer is present in or doing business present in only US Central, London, and Singapore. Only these 3 locations is what they do business. So they want VMs in those regions only. Now for that, I'm going to use custom VPC or custom mode basically. So here you have to decide your subnetwork yourself, folks. Yourself, you have to do it. Now what we will do is we'll use 2 concepts together to do it here. So we will use the concept of our RFC 1918 standard, and we'll also create 3 subnetworks, one in US Central, one in London, one in Singapore. So let me click on add, because what the subnetworks which you saw was always in class A. Why don't we do it in all different classes? So I'll call it as subnetwork US Central. And sometimes the naming is going to be really helpful, folks. If you see the naming which the default VPC had, everything is default. Subnetwork is also default. Network is also default. It becomes little difficult for you to understand there. But here, giving a name, because you are the judge, you can do whatever you want here. So you say the name should be like this, you give it. So you have full freedom here. So now is an important thing. You have to mention the region. Subnetwork VPC is global. Subnetwork is regional resource. It's regional resource. So you have to mention the region. So I wanted it in US Central. I'll mention this. US Central. Now is the IP range. So this is where your understanding of RFC 1918 standard comes into picture. So if I just give something like, for example, 35 dot when I do something like this, 35, everybody knows it's not internal IP address itself. But there are sometimes there could be a requirement. I really don't know a requirement which could be helpful, but this is a recent feature which Google did. What is that? You can give any range. You can give any IP range. That is okay. But when you do something like this, what happens is they will ask a confirmation. Confirm that my subnet configuration is outside of RFC 1918 standard. After applying this, all traffic to the destination remains in the VPC network. Ensure will not conflict the range with an on-prem system. So if you want to do go against the standard, you can. But I'm not sure what are the implications. One of the biggest implication is you are going to the backbone, the the routers are not going to block your IP. It's going to continue basically. That's what I feel. So I usually don't use this option. So I've also not seen what could be the possible use case of it using a non-RFC for your internal IP, which may not be serving a great purpose, but there could be some specific reason why Google has done this. Maybe if you explore some documentation, you may get something. So that is possible. It is possible. This was one of the interview questions which I had got once. Say, can I create something out of non-RFC this thing? So it is possible. And this was, if I'm not wrong, last April, somewhere during the April time, last time, April, March time, they had made this possible. So we don't want to use this. We wanted to use 10.10.3.5.0/24. And this is totally random, folks. Totally random. I know the IP 10.172.16, 192.168. So afterwards, I make up the number. And I always put the subnetwork mask as /24, meaning first 24 bit is blocked by the network. Only 8 IP or 8 bits are available. The last 8 bit is available for addressing it, addressing my VM. So meaning 2 power 8, if I make 256, if I'm not wrong, if my math is correct, 2 power 8, 256 IPs is what I can allocate. And there are some 4 reserved IPs which we'll talk later. So 252 is what totally I can use when I create something like this. I usually start like this when I do it. So start with 10. I always make the subnetwork mask as 24/24. And there are other few stuffs which we will leave it as default for now. Let's not make it a burden to understand everything in one shot. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a custom VPC. We created a subnetwork in London, and the range is 10.3.5.0/24. The last 8 bit is going to change. What are the values it can have? For that, you can just go to your cider.xyz. So what was the IP which I gave? If you see it here, 3.5. Let me make it as 3.4. Or you want to make it 2, let me make it 2. Or 1.2. So 1, 2, 0, and 24. You see the first 24 bits are blocked. It's going to be always 10.1.2. So only the last 8 bit is going to change. So the first IP is going to be 10.1.2.1. The last IP is going to be 10.1.2.255. That's it. This is what is going to happen with my specific range. Now, if I make some mistake, it's going to show that it looks like it is out of. For example, if instead of 10, if I make it as 11, it's going to say it's not an RFC 1918 standard. So is this part clear, folks? How do you put a range? Now here you should not, when you are doing for on-prem to GCP migration, please don't put a random number of your choice. Why? You have the luxury of changing the CIDR range or creating a new network in your GCP. People will not have that luxury in on-prem, folks. So when you are doing something as a migration, and it's very clearly mentioned in the requirement, you are going to do on-prem to GCP migration, and on-prem there is existing for ages, but your cloud, nothing is there. You have joined the organization to do this entire stuff. First of all, you should ask the networking team, what is the CIDR range? What is the range which you are using, so that you don't use that range. Otherwise, IP overlap will come. So it's not that randomly you select a number of your choice, but you have to select a range which is not conflicting with your on-prem. But if you are doing it for a startup, I would say you don't need even VPC. Hope that makes sense. folks. What is the importance of this IP? So could be something as a point which you can tell when you're doing a migration. It could be very simple, but an important one. So they may ask a question in your interview, what are the various steps for your on-prem to GCP migration? So I would interact with one of the specific personnel, basically the networking person in on-prem, understand the range so that I don't have a conflict later when two networks communicate each other. So the next subnetwork uh, is subnetwork London. We already use class A. Why don't we use class B? Class B is basically, so London, if I'm not wrong, is Europe 2. I may be wrong. Let me verify it. Why to give a guess? 2 is London if I'm not wrong, but I usually get 1 is Belgium, 2 is London if I'm not wrong. 2 is London. Good. So let's use this thing. So anybody can give a class B range, folks. Now you know the trick. Can you give me a range, class B range? Give a try. Don't give it so broad. Anil B's option is a good one. So Anil B's option is a good one. So 172.16.1.0/24. We'll keep everything as /24. We'll keep it as /24 so that we know 256 is the max. So this is a good one. Or if you don't like this, you can also have it like this. Till 31 is all good, folks. But the moment you make it as 32, it's going to be a non-RFC IP address. You get that very clearly. And this was the reason why I discussed this RFC 1918 standard in the beginning. So till 31 is all internal IP. After that, it is all external. So I'm going to start with the first range, 172.16.1/24. Done. The last one, let's do Singapore. Subnetwork -Singapore. Now US Asia Southeast one. Now let's go with class C, folks. So can you give me a range for class C? Now you should have a better idea. Beautiful, Anil Kumar. So I'll just put that 192.168.1.0/24. That's it. Job done. So we have 3 subnetworks, folks. So because my class B starts with 172, Mangesh. It starts with 172.16. So this is, I can put a description here. Class B. So US Central was class A because it is 10 dot address space. And Singapore is class C. That's it. All right. So what we did, basically, we gave a name, created the subnetwork in a custom mode because customer operates only in 3 regions. That's it. All other stuffs, we are going to leave it as default. We are not going to touch it. We are going to touch this once we come back, learn this concepts well. What is dynamic routing mode? What is this transmission unit? All those things we'll learn at a later point of time. This time, we just wanted to create a subnetwork. That's it. So now, before I click on create, I wanted to show you the command line equivalent of it. What is the command line equivalent of it? So that you get an idea. So gcloud compute networks create, it creates a network basically, then the VPC, an empty VPC, then you create a and you also mention the mode. This is important. Subnetwork mode, it would be either in auto or custom. So custom subnetwork -mode is equal to custom. That's the one which is going to decide what is the kind of subnetworks are going to be created. So it is going to be custom here. So you have 3 entries: gcloud, compute, network, subnetworks create. Subnetworks create. So for a change, instead of me creating click here, let me create it in a command line, folks, for a specific reason. So what I will do is I'll make sure I connect my Cloud Shell and run this command. So if I click on Cloud command line, you have this option, run in Cloud Shell. What happens basically is every command gets they gets concatenated, ampersand ampersand. That's the common way which people do in Linux. 2 commands you want to run one after other. First command ampersand ampersand, the second command. That's what going to happen if there are 4 gcloud commands. Click in run in cloud run. It's going to become like this, one single command. You see, from here till here is one command. Afterwards there is an ampersand ampersand, which is basically do this together one after the other is what it is saying. So let me hit enter and you will see some good verbose information. Command line is always more verbose compared to your UI. UI does not even give anything, any tips it does not give, but command line always gives you a good amount of verbose information. Let's see what is that verbose information which it gives. It's taking time. Okay, VPC is created. So batch 6 custom VPC is created. Now you see this useful information, folks. Instance in this template will not be reachable until firewall rules are created. Example, allow internal traffic between the instance as well as SSH, RDP, ICMP, all those things. So, and they also give you a suggestion to basically create the firewall rule with the command gcloud compute firewall rules create blah blah blah. That's really a useful information. That's really a useful information when you do it in command line. When I was doing this, when I was learning, right, I did it in UI. And I had a problem with the UI while doing it. But this kind of a verbose information in command line is always helpful. So now I have the subnetworks, 3 subnetworks created. Good. Now let me just close this terminal. I don't need it. That information was really helpful. If I go to VPC now, you see this. What you created is there. Awesome. So we have what is that? We have a custom mode VPC, which has a presence in 3 regions. And we have used all 3 classes. Now, this is where people with networking background will really appreciate Google Cloud VPC. Is usually if you see in on-prem, right, the logic is going to be the way the networking works is something like this. You'll have it's going to be basically a tree structure. So it's going to be something like the network. The network IP is going to start with 10.0.0.0/8 internal IP, right? Class A. This is the main network. Then they will have subnetwork 1. Now subnetwork 1 should be part of your main network, right? It's going to be always part of it. So now it cannot have 192. It has to inherit what is the range there. So meaning you can have a subnetwork something like this. You can have a second subnetwork like this. This is what you can do. You cannot have a network which is not part of this range. Not possible. This is not at all possible in on-prem. Anybody wants to comment on this, folks? This is how it works in on-prem. You cannot have different classes. So it is always inherited from the root network, the main network which you have created. But when it comes to GCP, right, it is possible. Why? Why it is possible in GCP is the network. This is your VPC, right? It does not have an IP range itself, folks. It's just a construct. That's it. It's like a placeholder. That's it. So GCP gives you the freedom of having subnetworks in different ranges. And will they communicate? Definitely it is possible. We can see that it is going to communicate. So it does not need to be always in the class. The class, the CIDR range or the class A, class B, class C which you have, so has no connect between the communication. As long as it is in the same network, I can help you easily make work. Simple. Is this concept clear, folks? This is something very important, slightly different from the traditional on-prem or Cisco style of networking. So Cisco style of networking is usually like this. This is how it works. But GCP is totally different. And I have seen people with this background, the networking background, feel little difficult to understand this in the beginning. Uh, there, but once they get it, they really like this feature. Any questions on this part, folks? First of all, any questions? Is it clear? Okay, no response. I'll take it to my advantage. Thanks, Mangesh, for the confirmation. Now, VPC is created. VPC is created. Go ahead and please create the VMs. Let's go ahead and create the VMs. So let's try to do the same demo. For a minute, let's ignore London. We'll do the same demo which we did. US and what is that? Singapore using the VPC, which we created. So I'm going to use the template. Server SG. Here, if I click on networking, right, I have to see whether it has picked up. Yes, it has picked up my network, and it has an IP which is the subnetwork which you gave, class C. So the IP of my VM is going to be something which I can easily predict now. That is, it's going to be 192.168.1.2 is my IP address is going to be. How? I'll tell you later, because first IP is going to be 192.168.1.1 is going to be used for something called as gateway. It is already used. One IP is already used, meaning 256 minus 1 is already been used. So you are only left with 255. The next IP is going to be allocated to your VM. And so that's what I'm saying here. So it's going to be easier to say. Usually the first IP is going to be gateway. Now let me click on create, folks.
Mahesh, one small question here. Is it possible to create VM, because we are creating VM in Singapore, but can I create network with class A in our example with the US network range?
We can. That's what we are going to do. We are going to do that. We are going to create VMs.
Oh, okay.
That's the next part. So the VM is created in Singapore, and the network is batch 6 custom VPC. Now let me create one more VM in US. Now you will see the IP of that internal IP of that US machine is going to be 10 dot. So let me create that using the template. So I'll call this as server US and change the region to US Central. That's it. And if I see my networking, I should see that option already enabled. You see subnetwork US. It's going to be in 10 dot address space. So let me create this one. Let me create one more in London. So use a template. Select the region. Assume the person who is doing this is not from London, but he's sitting in Switzerland. So the basic tendency is where they are sitting, they will try to create that. So he gave it as London, but mistakenly, by mistake, he selected Switzerland, A zone. And let's see what is going to happen. So when I do this kind of a stuff, the network comes to your protection because you have mentioned I can only have VMs in this region. I can block any other region totally. Does not matter whether Google is going to have 25, 26 or 30 regions, but I operate only in these three regions. I don't want my developers or my DevOps person to create it in any other region. So this is a way you can block it, folks. You see this? Now I by mistake I made it as Switzerland, but since I don't have a sub network, I cannot even create a VM accidentally or even purposely also. This is one of the big advantage of your custom VPC. So meaning where you want, you create it. So meaning whenever you create your VPC, the subnetwork, basically to be more specific, the subnetworks, you should ask the customer the question, where and all you want to have a presence, where you want to operate. That's going to give you the answer for your subnetwork, where your subnetworks needs to be created. That's very, very important. So the VPC the acts as a kind of protection from people creating VMs in n number of regions. But if it was default VPC, right, it would allow you because it is having subnetworks in all regions. But your custom VPC is only for a specific region. It's not going to allow you. So this is a good protection, I would say. People, because there would be a project where n number of people from different locations will be working together, so they have a tendency of creating it in their own region. So to avoid that, custom VPC is going to be a good choice. So I have to make it London, US Central or Singapore. Only in three regions only it's going to work. So now if I select London, I'll select A zone. Now you will see London subnet London is going to come. So create it. Now we have three VMs all in the same VPC, but the beauty is they have different classes. The internal range, which the IP which we have used all the three classes. This is the beauty. This is the beauty. This is only possible, I would say, very easily in GCP. I'm not sure in other cloud whether that's possible, but in GCP it's possible uh, because the VPC is a global construct. Basically, it's a construct. So now servers are done. What next? SSH into US server, SSH into Singapore server, do the ping. That's it, right? So it took us a good amount of time to do this actually. So which was very easily done with our default VPC, but it had its own loopholes. So to avoid that, we came to create our own VPC. So let me click on US, sorry, first Singapore, I'll click on it. I'll come to London towards the end. So SSH into US machine. So so if I just go here, let's wait for it to show up, folks. Okay, I get a message like this. This is server SG. What is this, folks? What could be the possible issue? What could be the possible issue? Yes, Kumar, that's correct. That's yes, Anil Kumar, that's good. Yes, Nagesh. So that's correct. Anybody else? Anybody else wants to comment? Deepak, yes, that's correct. So in AWS, this is called as security group. In GCP, it is called as firewall rules. So the firewall rule was not open. So the reason why it was so easy for you to comment is one, you may be coming from a cloud background, other cloud background. Two, you may be coming from a networking background. Three, maybe because of the gcloud command when we ran, it gave us that suggestion, but we did not do that. We did not do that. So we did not create a firewall rule. So we just left with the implicit firewall rule. Can I see the implicit firewall rule? No, you cannot see it, but it's going to be implicit. And that's the reason when I was creating the default VPC showing it, I showed you that. So when I go to firewall rules, you will not see any firewall rule, folks. You will not see anything. But there are two firewall rules which is hidden or implicit. Incoming traffic is blocked or denied. Outgoing traffic is allowed. So from the VM, outgoing traffic is going to be possible, but incoming traffic, which is SSH, is blocked. So we have to create a firewall rule. Let's create a firewall rule. First, let's make it open. Slowly, we'll make it restrictive. Okay. So at least one part which we have achieved better than the default VPC is not having too much of presence across all the subnetworks or all across all the regions. We have restricted ourselves to a specific region, and also we have decided the range ourselves. That's one advantage which we have got over what we have seen. Now let me create it as allow SSH ICMP, which is nothing but ping, and the network is batch 6 custom VPC FW. So either putting FW in the beginning or towards the end is going to help you very easily to understand it is a firewall rule. So basically some naming conventions, folks. So again, this is very good, helpful when you look into any details. By just looking at the name itself, it should convey whether it's a firewall rule or it's something else. So that's going to be a good option, I would suggest. So, and firewall rules are always applied to a network. Remember that it is always applied to a network, not directly to a VM. It is applied to a network, first of all. And since VPC is global, firewall rule is also going to be global. VPC, so it's already global. So why don't we put this? Otherwise, I'll forget this. VPC is global. I guess the first resource after 20th class or in the 20th class which we are seeing which is global is this thing. Subnetwork firewall rule is global. Subnetwork is what, folks? What is the scope of subnetwork? Regional. Correct, Anil Kumar and Anil B. So it's going to be only regional. All remaining stuffs are no. Routes we have not even discussed. We'll discuss it later. So this one. Okay. Done. Routes will come. So this is very, very important. This is very, very important. Firewall rule, okay, even if you forget it, but subnetwork is always regional. Remember that. So going back, priority. Whenever you create your own firewall rule, the priority is going to be not 65535 or anything. By default, it's going to be 1000. Meaning the number is less, but the priority is very high. Totally the opposite way. So the highest priority is 0, folks. Nobody can beat that. The priority is usually used whenever there's a tie break kind of a stuff. Whenever you want to say which one should you take as a preference. So that's where this priority comes into picture. So if you have a priority which is of 0, nobody can override that. It is going to be applied. The lowest priority is going to be 65535, where there are 2 firewall rules, implicit firewall rules. So let's just leave it as default. We are exploring it for the first time. And the type of traffic, incoming traffic, I want to SSH. That's going to be an incoming traffic to the VM. So if you have a egress traffic to be done, you can configure the egress. So what I want is an incoming traffic. And what is the action you want to do? Allow me to SSH or deny, basically. So I want the firewall rule to allow. That's the reason I have mentioned it in very clearly in the firewall rule. Allow SSH and ICMP. So that name indicates very well. So allow is the action. Traffic direction is incoming. Action is, if the rule matches, allow it. And what is the target? So there's going to, whenever you apply firewall rule, there's going to be 2 things. One is the target. The other one is the source. So when you click on the target, basically this is going to, whether it applies to all the instances in this network. How many instances do you have in this network? 3. The network is batch 6 custom VPC. There are 3 VMs. Maybe in the future you may have more VMs. So if you want to put a firewall rule like this, apply this firewall rule to all the VMs which you create in the network. Which network? Batch 6 custom VPC. That is the target. My target is my VM. So any VMs which I create in this VPC, this firewall rule should apply. Now that's good. Now, is there any filter which you want to put? Basically the source from where you can connect. The source can be my laptop, your laptop, our cloud shell, or anything else. So here you have different options: IP range, source, tag, service account. Let's use the first one, and we'll also touch upon tags and service account soon. IP range. So for a minute, I'll make the same mistake which default firewall rule also did. Open it to the entire world. For now, just for testing it, open it, and you should never ever put this. And this is the one which was triggering that alarm which I mentioned, the Palo Alto's Red Lock Prisma, that product. This was the one which was doing. So you should not do this, but for our learning purpose, I'm just doing it, and we'll try to fix it later soon. Okay. So that's the source IP. So what I did basically gave a name which is really intuitive. By just looking at the name itself, I'll come to know. Then I can turn on logs, but it's going to increase the price. So I don't need to do that. I apply firewall rule to a network. This is very important. Let me make this very clear. Add it in a cheat sheet. I don't know why the numbers are not coming. I'll fix this later. Firewall rules. People get confused. I create firewall rules to a VM. No. Firewall rules are applied to a network, to a VPC or a network. Hence, firewall rules are also global. So priority is an important one. We will do one more demo on priority soon. The traffic is going to be ingress, and action is going to allow me. If the source IP is this, allow me to connect to the VMs which is there. And is there any specific port you want to open? If you make all port, this is the deadliest combination which you are going to do. Entire world can connect to this VM on all ports, whatever the ports are there. This is the worst option one can do, a bad guy can do. The best option is specify a specific port. So since we want port 22, which is our SSH port, and other protocols like ICMP, Internet Control Message Protocol, basically for our ping to work. That's it. So we specified a port, source, what is the action, all those things. Now we should be in a position to do the stuff. But before doing it, let's click on command line. So G-Cloud compute firewall rules create, and the entire details are mentioned. So let's create a firewall rule. Now let's go ahead and see whether it's going to work or not. Okay. So this one and this one. After this, we'll take a break. Server SC is not even connecting. Should work is my understanding, but it's not even connecting. Something with my Firefox. Let me just connect from my local machine. Let me just connect from a local machine. Okay, let me connect it from here. This is from my laptop. SSH. Both the terminals. Let's wait for it to connect and let's see whether the ping works. And even SSH. SSH also should work. If you block it, we can block it also. Slow. Connecting. Okay, some issue with, okay, both are connecting. Thank you. So I have the US server. I just put get the IP. Singapore is taking longer time. Don't know why. Good. Came up. IP. Sorry. IPA. IPA. So the IP of my US is going to be class A. So should work. I copy the IP of my Singapore machine, which is class T. Sorry. If I copy this, it works. It works. The same activity which we did in 10 minutes or 5 minutes in the beginning took us around more than an hour to understand why it was working. And we have tried to do something a little better than the default VPC. Now, SSH should also work, should not have issues because we have opened the firewall rule. So if I just remove this, and use SSH, it should SSH to my US server if things are all fine. There, I'm there to my server SG. Now another difference which we did from what was there in default VPC is the class does not have any difference here. As long as it's an internal IP address, I can communicate with internal IP address easily, is what it mentions. So if you just even ping your London server from so if I just exit, this is US Singapore server. Now if I do ping my London server, it will work from my US. If I ping it from my Singapore server, it's also going to work. So the class does not have anything. Yes, SSH worked. SSH worked is what I showed you, Mangesh. So if I connect, so if I get my IP of US, you see this is my IP. I SSH from my Singapore, it's going to work. Since I already tried it, it's not going to prompt. It's going to directly connect from my Singapore server to US server. It works. Just because you had your firewall rule configured like that. You see the firewall rule. What was the firewall rule? You mentioned you want port 22 and SSH from anywhere. From anywhere. That's what you mentioned. That's the reason it works, basically. So we'll take a break now, folks. Take a 10 minutes break. Come back. Once we come back, we will explore more on this firewall rules. More on this firewall rules. Okay. So take a break and come back. Let me stop the recording.
This conference will now be recorded.
Now, before the break, we made our same demo which was working in the morning time when we started. It started working the same way with basically with us with the custom VPC which we created. So that was good, but it was not super secure approach which we did. The reason is we still kept the firewall rule open to the world, open to the world. So let's try to make it little restrictive so that only people with a specific IP range instead of 0.0.0, only from a specific this thing it should work, is what we will do. First of all, I'll show from only from my laptop. So I'll try to get my IP address, IP5. So this is my IP address. What I'll do is instead of 0.0.0, we'll just only put a this thing from this IP. Okay, so that's what we are going to do. So you have the option of editing a firewall rule. So you can click on edit the firewall rule, and basically remove this huge mistake which is going to escalate us that it's been open to the world. So remove this, add. Now this is only one of my IP, so very specific. Either you can add it like this, or you can add it like, assume it's like a corporate, all the machines are going to be of this range. Means what I can do is I can just change the last bit, add task 24, something like this. Anybody with this range will be able to connect it. Or sometimes you will see people only give access to one specific IP, but they will still put /32, which is an indication that only that IP, no more IPs. Either explicitly mention the IP or put /32. Both are same, folks. Don't get confused. Because they would have always followed a practice of putting a subnetwork mask. Even if it is single IP, they put /32, indicating it is the only IP which you are allowed to connect. That's it, nothing else. Now it looks like a better firewall rule. It looks like a better firewall rule. Now if I go back to my firewall rules, you see the mistake which was one of the concerns of the default VPC. We have or the default firewall rule, we have removed it, and let's see whether it really works from my machine. So I'll go to my machine, SSH to any machine, it should work. SSH to London, SSH to US, Singapore, SSH to US. Sorry. So why the other things are not showing up? Okay. So let's wait for this system to connect, folks. First one is SG. What was the mistake which I did? It says port IP retry. Let me give a try once. Let's see, folks, whether it's going to connect. Looking at the
So,
firewall rule.
yeah,
Yeah,
Mahesh, when you had all global IP allowed, right? 0.0.0/0. That time I
yeah.
tried to SSH from my machine to one
Hmm.
of the VM. So I was not able to get those. So I was getting the permission denied. So
That is
I
because you
think
don't have the SSH key. You don't have the SSH key. I have not
public
shared you
key
the
there.
private SSH key. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Okay, that's the
so
public
that is
key.
not.
Okay.
That's the point.
But
Uh,
from your laptop when you're trying to do, how that is getting transferred then?
because I use basically what I use it here, so it's going to generate on the fly and transfer it. So
Okay, got it,
there are two
got it. You
ways.
are
There are
not
two
using,
ways.
yeah, you are not
I'm
using
not
the
using the
command.
putty
You are just
gen.
using
Yeah.
this UI.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
got it. Thank you. Yeah.
So it's still not connecting. So a good point to do some troubleshooting. So let's just verify whether the firewall rule which is created is proper or not. Hope my IP is not changing. I'll anyway do something like this, folks. Sometimes all of a sudden the IP can go for a toss. I'll just do something like this. Remove the last bit, make it as /24, just to see whether it's going to have any impact. I've seen sometimes it has. So I'm just going to make that change. Source IP is my machine's IP. Yes, Mangesh. That's what I have. I directly put the exact IP. It did not work. So I'm just going to make it as a range and see whether it's going to apply. So this is my IP. Source from where you are trying to SSH. To which machine is the target? Target is our VMs. So let me just try this time whether it works. Closest one is Singapore. Let me see whether it works. This should work. Otherwise, we'll try to fix out what's the issue. Here actually, okay, something very weird. We have to figure it out. So whenever you have this kind of a stuff, like basic stuff, I'm not able to SSH into the machine, even though I have all the access part. What you can do as a small tip is, there's a vertical dot here. There's a vertical dot here. What you can do is you can click on that vertical dot, click on network details. So what it's going to show is for this virtual machine, what are all the network details, the firewall rules, all those details is going to give you. This is a very useful tip. If you have such problems, you can come to know what is going to work or not. Basically. So if I just click on view network details, it should give me at least the firewall rules which is applied, all those things. So this is the network interface, one interface, and you have one firewall rule. Now click on this network ingress analysis. Only from this IP, if it's 22 and SSH, it's going to work. Egress, allow all, allow all. This is the implicit rule which we had seen, right? This is the deny all rule which you get, and allow all outgoing traffic. So our firewall rule looks okay, is what I see. If I just see it one more time, what's my IP? Is this something which oh, is that correct? Correct only.
Yes, sir. इसकी कॉल में कुछ खास नहीं है.
I guess. No, nothing to do with SSC. I guess Anil is on. Let me mute him. Okay. It looks like the SSD configuration needs to be changed or restart the SSD in the VM. Nothing, Anil Kumar. So because it's nothing to do with the VM specifically. So it's just the one which we are going to control via the firewall rule. It should work. Very weird. Let's just look into the details one more time. It can give us some more idea. Route analysis. You want to look into the route analysis? It has some routes, and we have not even come to the routes part. So it should be okay. It has those, it can connect to internet, it can connect to those routes, everything is there. It's only the firewall rule which is making a difference. Let's one more time visit it. What is that which we did different? So this is the IP. For a minute, let me just make it little open. Okay. I made a mistake. I'll tell you what is that. I'll put that same IP, folks. I'll put only this one only that, and do it. What was a mistake which I did? I tell you. This is a known issue. We'll make this mistake. So good that we did that. I was not even. I was just thinking this part. So now if I just go to my compute engine. If I click on SSH, it's not going to work. Let me just verify it and show you. It's not going to work. Why it's not going to work? Let me tell you. The reason is when you click on SSH button from the browser, the source IP is going to be different, folks. It's not, even though the browser is your laptop, it's using your internet, it's going to use a different source IP. There's going to be some proxy behind, so where a different source IP is going to come, because of which your firewall rule gets denied, basically. So whenever you put a firewall rule like only my laptop, only my VM should be able to do, you see the error, this comes. To overcome this part, right? When you put that kind of IP, you should avoid using basically the user interface. What you should do basically is click on this three dots, get view gcloud command, get this command, copy it, open it from your PowerShell or from your CMD. So what you can do is put the same thing here and hit enter. Now it's going to open up putty. Now it is coming from your own laptop, right? It's going to use your source IP, which is your public IP address. So this is an important thing which you need to keep in mind. If you do specifically put your own IP address and do it, it's not going to work from the UI. You have to do it from the command line. It should work. Let's wait. So in the next few minutes, I should have a pop-up if things are all fine. That's it, folks. You see, let me just increase the font. Font. Change settings. Now, if I put who, it shows there's one connection. It is exactly coming from my laptop. It's exactly coming from my laptop. But if I click on the SSH button, right, if that restriction is put, you'll have this issue not saying that port is not open, because the source IP is going to be totally different. And if you're interested in knowing what is that source IP, I can share you that what is that source IP. We can make it fix in the UI also. But by default, if you directly put something like this, you have to log in from your terminal or from your command line, basically. Is this making sense, folks? Is this clear? So we did not do any change to our system. Only thing is that you have to log in from your command prompt, basically. Now, can I SSH into my US server? Is it possible, folks? Can I SSH into my US server from here? US server is this one. If I put the US server, let me just show you. US server is 10.1.1.2, 10.1.2.2. I would say it will not work. Why? SSH, folks. The firewall rule is always SSH from this machine only. Now, what is the IP of this machine now? This is going to be a source IP. This is going to be a source IP, which is 192.168.1.2.2. So if I do now, basically SSH, sorry, SSH to my US machine, I will not even able to connect. It's going to show port not opened, something like that. The firewall is going to be denied only because you have put a firewall rule like that. So it heavily depends on your firewall rule. So even though you have a network, super good network, all those things, if your firewall has goofed up, you will have issues like this. Is this part clear, folks? So because you have the firewall rule mentioned, only the source IP is my external IP, this one. Only if it is coming from there, it's going to work. Meaning if I get this IP, copy this US server configuration, open up a new command prompt, it will work. It will work. It's going to open one more putty window and I should be able to see it. But it only connects from my laptop. Nothing else is going to work basically. And you see, I'm in server. If I just do change settings, font, I see I'm in server US. I'm in server US and I'm in server SG. Only from my laptop it works because I have mentioned the source IP is only this one. So I cannot SSH to another server. It's because of firewall rule. Is that part clear, folks? If I were to do it, putty should be installed on your laptop, not required. If you install Cloud SDK, the putty will be automatically installed. You don't need to have putty. The Cloud SDK has putty built in. So it comes there. So it uses that putty. So is this part clear, folks? So the IP plays the firewall rule plays a major role when you are connecting. Now, if you want to really make this connect work, what should you do, folks? What should you do? If from server US I want to ping server SG, what should I do? What should I do, folks? It's not working. We have seen it. We have seen it here. It did not work. Same is the case with US also, US server also. From US server, if you were to forget about SSH, even ping will not work. So if I use this one, even ping will not work. Even ping will not work. Yes, add the CIDR range which you have as your firewall rules, allowed source IPs. Now you see the ping is not working. Ping is not working. So if I So from US, if I try to ping, if I do it, so the ping will not work. From US, Singapore server to US, similarly from US to Singapore, it's not going to work. The fix which we are going to do now is add the firewall rules. As Anil Kumar and Mangesh mentioned, add those range to make it work. So I'm going to edit it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the possible sources are, go to my network, subnetwork, I'll get those details. So I should add these sources, folks. This is my range. So add this as one, add your US. Let's ignore London for now, just to show you it only works between these two. That's it. Done. The moment I click on save, I'm going to jump back to the terminal where you see these things. I can put it like this. I have not still clicked on save, so firewall rule is still not in place. So the moment I do firewall rule, the stuff, it should start working. So I have added it. Let me just click on save. I've clicked on save. Let's see whether the ping starts working. It's working, folks. Now you understand the power of firewall rules, how you apply it. Now it was only based on IP, but not every time this IP is going to be helpful because IPs keep changing. So it's not a great one to put with IPs. There are some better ways which you can do. So what are those better ways? Let me just show you. There are some better ways. Let me just close this. So if I just go to my firewall rule, This one was a good one, I would say, but it was creating troubles. So what we can do is usually instead of putting this one only from my laptop, what I can do is basically have something called as identity aware proxy. uh, Range of IPs put. So if I just go to, I guess we talked about identity aware proxy by any chance, folks? Sorry, I don't remember it. Did we talk about IAP in our virtual machine class, if I'm not wrong? Or we did not even talk? No. Okay, we have not talked about it. Okay, then we'll discuss it. Uh, so uh, if I go to IAM, Identity Aware Proxy, IAP, let me see if it's enabled first of all or not. It's not even enabled. Let me enable this. We'll talk more about this, but I just wanted to get a specific source IP, which will do this part. So let me enable the IAP. So it's going to be a kind of a proxy, which is going to be between us and the VMs. So it's going to give us some details, what kind of IPs if you whitelist. This is the specific source IP. If you add this one, right, I should be able to connect from the Google system easily. Basically is what this indicates. So IAP requires a firewall rule that allows traffic from IAP to your VM. So this way, if I add this as a whitelisted IP, what it's going to do is basically I can connect from my from my laptop, from my web console, everywhere it's going to work, everywhere. And we are also not using a open firewall rule 0.0.0. This is going to be a good choice. So let me just do this. And I've never tried IAP with internal. Let me just remove everything. Put only this one, folks, nothing else. What is this net? And this is from Google. We can believe this. We can easily, I would say, blindly believe this source IP. This is from Google, which is fixed. So you don't need to worry about the authenticity of this source. So this is going to be something which you can rely. So I have removed all the IPs, made it very simple, which is the identity aware net block, the range. That's it. They are mentioning you can open everything, all the TCP port if you want. If you are not so comfortable, you can mention it like this. Basically, like this you can mention basically if you want. Or if you are very specific, I want only 22, nothing else, you can put the specific thing. That is also okay. Let me just enable this. Done. Done. Now I don't have 0.0.0. That's the big benefit. Now I have put a specific range which is called as the IAP specific range. Now if I refresh, my server should be all good. So I should be able to connect with internal IP address also. So now the configuration is good, meaning if I connect from my console, it should work. No need of any more my laptop having cloud SDK, all this. I don't need anything. Click on it, it should work. Because when I click on SSH, the IP, the source IP which uses is the one which I showed you, starting with 35 dot, what is that? 35.235.240.0. So this is your IAP firewall source IP range. If you give that, you should be able to connect it. So let's see whether it connects. By the time this connects, I'll just add this in the cheat sheet, in the implementation, real implementation. If you don't know what source to add, at least as a best practice, always remove 0.0.0 in the firewall and add IAP firewall source IPs instead. Let's see whether it connects. Yes, I'm there. I'm there. If I do who, will come to know the actual source, folks. IAP app will come to that also, Anil. So when we do the last demonstration in networking, I'll show you the IAP app. How do we use that? Is for SSH. That is for HTTPS resources. What we are seeing currently is for SSH resources, basically VMs. So you see the source IP, which is in that range only. You see this 35.235.240.131. So now let me see whether I can ping my London server or US server.
Excuse me, Mesh.
Yeah.
How to get this IAP IP range? I mean, I missed that actually.
It's fixed. It's fixed actually. It is fixed. You just need to go to your IAP, enable IAP. If you just go to enable IAP, if it's not enabled, it's going to show an error, or it's in the documentation. Usually if you search for IAP range, you'll get that. It is fixed. It's not for my project. This is going to be one. For your project, it's going to be different. It's going to be always fixed. So IAP firewall. If I do that, so it's going to give me that specific source IP range, which is going to be 35. This one. You see this? This is fixed. This is in the
Oh,
documentation.
okay. I thought that you were showing somewhere in a console. That's why I thought.
No, no, no,
eh,
no. This is fixed. This is fixed. This is
Okay.
fixed. But how did it allow from local desktop? How did it not allow from local? So when you use from, sorry, I did not understand this part. Does IAP use the same to? Anil Kumar, I did not understand last question. But will not allow from local.
So basically,
Local.
from local desktop, like you went
Oh,
through
okay,
the
you're
G
saying.
Cloud, yeah. So it will not allow that.
It will not work, and now it will not allow. That is correct.
Yeah.
So now if I, because the source is only from the Google. So let me just show you. That's a good one. So let me show you that. So because my source is only the IAP related one, if I try to connect like this, it's going to show me an error. Port is not open or blocked is what it's going to show. So that's a good point. That's a good point. So let's wait for it to show that error message. If you want to allow your local, then you use a normal way. So if you want both the options, IAP and also your own laptop's external IP address you added, then it's going to work. Otherwise, you are going to get an error like this. Totally true, Anil Kumar. That's correct. Thanks for pointing it out, making it very clear. Let me see the US server's internal IP, and I never tried this, folks. I'm not very sure this is going to work. So I'm in server US, sorry, server Singapore. Let me ping server US. Does not work. Does not work. Only reason your IP is not whitelisted or that's not allowed. So only to make it work. So if there is a requirement, sometimes this can happen. So cannot put 0.0.0 and you cannot put your own local machine's IP, but you still want to use in the UI. So at that time, adding your IAP's list of firewall rules is going to be source IPs is going to be an easy fit. From the console, you can just come and do it. Anybody who has IAM access to connect to a virtual machine, they will be able to easily do it. So this could be a easy option which you can use. Removes your. This is a good one, right? You are using the best practice. At least in your UI, it is working. So instead of 0.0, opening it to the world, just add only this as your source IPs instead. That's going to be a better one. So I'll just mention this link in this thing so that people who wants to refer to this link, it's not something which is going to be specific to a project. It's going to be common, specific to common. But enough of playing with IPs. Let's see a better way. Let's see a better way which we wanted to try. Sometimes IPs is going to be helpful quickly, but not always. So going back to the firewall rule, if I edit it, I'm going to remove this, or yeah. What I'm going to do is, I'm not going to put source IP itself. I'll change the filter itself to something totally different. So what I'm going to say is source tag. If the source machine is having the specific tag, you should allow it, is what you are going to say. So tag is nothing but a textual data. So you just click on source tag. You can give any name, folks. You can give any name. It's going to work. So you can give any name. Make sure from the VM from which you are trying to connect has a source. Then you will be able to see the communication working basically. So this is the second option. I'll show you a demo. The third option is using a service account. Maybe next week we will see a demo on service account. As per the documentation, they always say it is always better to use service account when you create a firewall rule. Why? More on that in our next class, but today we'll just see the source tag. So the source tag part and see it, because this is the source. Now if I'm coming from my own laptop or anything, the source tag is going to be a little difficult. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to basically create two firewall rules. Uh, say for example, one for specifically Linux, one for Singapore, one for London, one for US, something of that sort, so that I can see from Singapore I should be able to ping London, but from US I should not be able to ping London machine, something like that. So where I can play around with the source tag, that is what we are going to do. So for that, maybe what I will do is how do I test this part? I should I have to do two things. I'll create two firewall rules. Cancel this. So this is okay. Let me create one more firewall rule. Create a new firewall rule. Something like only from London to Singapore to London. Only these two machines can communicate. Something like that. Allow SSH, ICMP, London, between them only. FW. Network is this one. Okay, maybe I should set the context first. Let me set the context. So you are able to SSH into Singapore machine. Let me also SSH to London machine. I'll also have the US machine. I will be able to log in from the console because of that IAP rule firewall source IPs, but I cannot ping the other machines because it's not allowed. How I can make it work with specifically a different set of firewall rules is what I want to show. And specifically, we are going to put some specific restrictions. London to Singapore and Singapore to London should work. but London should not be reachable from US. Something like that is what we are going to do. So let me just wait for this to connect. I have US, sorry, let me, I have London and so if I copy the IP, so I don't know what happens. Okay, my copy paste is having issue. It does not work. Does not work. Similarly, copy from Singapore IP, ping it from London. It's not going to work because simple, the firewall rule does not exist. Now what we are going to do is only for London and Singapore, the communication should be established. Meaning if I ping from London, ping should work for the Singapore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it as a tag. So tag like EMEA APAC, something like that. So if the tag is existing, it's going to work basically. So that's what I'm going to do basically. So what I will do now is create a new firewall rule, and the firewall rule you can put on all networks. Let's put it on all network, all the instance in the network, and I'm going to use a source tag, meaning from which machine you are trying to access, right? That machine should have a source tag. What is that source tag? It should have something like APAC, EMEA, and it can be any text, folks. It can be Mahesh also. It could be anything you want, but follow some naming convention. That's it. EMEA. That's it. That's the source tag. So if the VM from which I'm trying to ping, if this is having the source tag, I am going to allow you basically. So what I want to allow you to do, let's just do ping for now. Only ping. I should be able to ping it. So let me just click on this. So there's a new firewall rule applied. Both are 100 same priority, different filters. One is an IP, the other one is a tag. Now, if I go back, so if I go, nothing happens. Nothing happens. It's still not reachable. The reason is you should add this to your source. Meaning each VM you should add a tag. You need to add a tag to the individual VM. So let me add the tag to London machine. The moment I add this to London machine, what's going to happen is from London, if I ping, the London is going to have the tag. So this one should start working. In the Singapore part, you should see it working if things are all fine. So let me go add the tag only to London machine. How do I do it? Go to your virtual machine. Yes, Anil, we have to add tag. Before I add tag, I'm just going to remove this column, folks. Machine type is not important for us. I'm going to remove it. I'm going to add a column called as network tag. Currently, no VMs have a tag. I'm going to go to London. Edit. Under my network tag, I add the same word which I used. It should be exactly the same textual information. That's it. Click on save. Now let me see whether anything works. Is the rule applied? Still applying. The tag getting still applied. If I go back to the home screen, refresh it, you see only for London there is a tag. Now something should be working. So the source IP was I told differently, I guess, if I am not wrong. So it's working in, for a minute, let me just stop it. So the source IP, if I ping this from London, I can ping Singapore. Yeah, this makes sense. I'm in London machine. I'm trying to ping Singapore. Now, to ping Singapore machine, if you have this tag, which is APAC EMEA, it's going to work. In your Singapore machine, you don't have the tag. So that's the reason when you try to ping any machine, it's not going to have, it's not going to allow it. So the source, here the source is my machine itself. So in London, I can see the tag. In Singapore, I don't see that tag. And that's the reason I'm not able to ping it. Is that clear, folks? The source, sometimes the tagging can be another option where you can play around with it. Now you see only one way you are able to have the communication established. Other way you're blocking it. So same is the case with your US. From US, you cannot even, if I just copy this, from US, you cannot ping Singapore machine. It's not going to work. Is this part clear, or is it still, I feel it was not that great a demo, but I just wanted to get your thoughts, whether it was clear or it was not clear. If it's not clear, I'm going to recreate it one more time. Is it clear, folks, or is it not clear? If you want, I can add it. Now, can you add a tag in the London? Yes. So meaning the London machine has a tag. London machine has a tag, which is add APAC-UI EMEA. Because that London machine, from the London machine, if you ping, basically like this, there's going to be something called a source machine, destination machine. Now, my source is London machine, and I'm trying to ping from Singapore machine from London machine. So what the firewall rule which we have put is, if the source, which is London, is having this thing called as tag called as EMEA, APAC-EMEA, the source is now allowed to communicate or allowed to ping, basically. That is what we have done. So there's nothing related to the target. It's only the source is what we are trying to rely on, basically. Now, I can break this further. What I can say is not applied to every VM. If I go to this firewall rule, it is applied to all the targets, meaning all the VMs in this network, it's going to work. But still, it will allow SSH from the local desktop. Local desktop will not even work because we don't have anything. So from the local desktop, nothing is going to work. No, it's not going to work because we don't have anything related to local. Now, what I'm going to do is make this still further complex. What I'm going to do is, instead of putting it to all the VMs, no, it should not work for all the instances in this VM, but I'm going to put a target tag. Only VMs which have this tag will work, is what I'm going to do. So how do I do it? So now the source should be matching, target should be matching, only then the firewall rule is going to apply. So what is the target which we are going to do? We are going to put a target like batch 6. That's the target. Any VM which is having this tag, and one VM can have n number of tags usually. So source should have this, meaning London machine should have this, Singapore machine should have batch 6. Only then the ping will work. Let's just see what happens. The ping was working before, right? The ping was working before. Now, because of this change, it's not going to work. So if I just go back, the target is a tag, filter is also a tag. Now, oh shit, I closed it. If I go to my VM, the VM, only one tag is there. Now, if I go back, previously ping was working. If I do now, it will not work, folks. Why? It is expecting, the firewall rule is expecting Singapore to have a target tag, which is batch 6. Only when you add that tag, it's going to work. Let's see this in action by putting a tag to Singapore. So only for Singapore, I'm going to add it. So if I just go, I'm going to add tag and jump back to the terminal quickly to show you the ping is going to work. Or maybe I can clear the screen. Clear the screen from London. So I'm going to edit my server Singapore, where I'm going to add a tag. The tag is batch 6. And it's going to take a couple of minutes for it to get updated. I'll click on save and jump to the black terminal. Okay. So save. Let's wait. If things are all working fine, the ping should start working in my London machine. It's working. It's working. But for the Singapore to do the same thing, you have to add the same kind of tags. Is this part clear, folks? How a target tag works, how a source tag works? Any questions? Let me know. Now, if I want to make the same way Singapore also needs to work, basically what I should do is, go back, add the tags there also. Oh, sorry. So let me add EMEA tag, APAC EMEA tag for Singapore and batch 6 for London. Then it's going to be all good. Batch 6. That's a target. VMs with this target, you should be able to ping. Done. No changes to your Singapore server. The reason is Singapore server is trying to reach London, but the Singapore server does not have the tag, which is APAC-EMEA. So that's the reason it's not allowing you to do that. So let me just do this part and you should be able to see it running in action. So if I just refresh the screen, you should see London having both the tags. So I'm just going to add Singapore also to have the tags. Now I could have done with the one tag itself. That is also possible, but I wanted to show you to the entire journey, so I had to use 2 tags. So I'm going to use a tag. Save it. It's going to take a minute. Once the firewall rule is the tag is updated, you should see this part working. That's it, folks. So everything using tags, we made it work. We made it work, and it looks so easy compared to our IP address. Do you agree? Compared to IP address, the tag was so easy. If I'm not wrong, you don't need to find the IP, what is the range, all those things. It was so easy with the help of tag. But whenever it is something easy, right, I feel there's going to be a catch there. There's going to be always a catch, which can be sometimes misused. Can be sometimes misused. So who can add a tag, basically? Who can add a tag? To know that, there's a nice article which was written 2 years back by Google. I would strongly suggest you to look into this. Yeah, owner, editor, and specifically the predefined role, if it comes, it's going to be something called as compute instance admin. So I'll show you that article itself. So very beautifully written article. So if I not this one. It's in the bookmarks. You should be able to see it also, folks. So strongly suggest you to. So who can create a tag is basically a person who has, it mentions here very clearly, compute instance admin role. Person with this role, they should be able to create a tag. So let me just show you what is the tag, who can create it. So if I just go to my IAM roles, compute instance admin, if I search for set tag, person with this permission, anybody, any role with this role can set a tag. So let me just copy this and search for it. Who and all who can have this? Basically, the lowest one is compute instance admin, if I'm not wrong. I'll just search for this permission. So these are the people who can, these are the roles which can have. So basically around 19 roles. Some of them we have not even touched. Custom, we created it, forget it. Compute admin can do that. Editor, owner, as Anil Kumar and Anil B mentioned, can, sorry, somebody mentioned. Anil Kumar mentioned this, owner and editor. Compute admin can do it. Network admin cannot do it. Please make it very clear, network admin will never have any access to firewall rules. This is the funniest thing, I would say. There is one more
Mahesh,
role called as security admin.
Mahesh, we are talking about two things, right? One is the tag creation, another is attaching tag to the instance, right? So that should
So
be by
tag
different
creation.
people, right?
So tag creation basically can be done for a VM by a compute admin and by a compute instance. Where is that?
No, actually, I'm lost here because we are
Instance
talking about the
admin.
tag creation, and tag creation will be in the network, right?
Tag creation would be in the network. That is going to be created, can be done. Actually, firewall rule, basically, right? Firewall rule. Who can create
Yeah.
a firewall rule is basically a role called as, for example, let me just make it clear. So then I'll come here. So compute dot firewall rules create. So if I click on this permission, the people who are the roles which can do is editor, no wonder, owner, again not a this thing, but you will never see anything like network admin. A network admin can only create VPC. A security admin only can create firewall rules. So network admin has no role to play anything with the firewall because they have made it as two different roles. A network admin can create a VPC. For example, if I do here compute dot network create, who can create a network? A network admin. As Anil B mentioned, a network admin can create a network, the VPC subnetworks, but he cannot create a firewall rule. So what he can create basically is this is more of security stuff. If I create this one, go to compute network admin. As a network admin, I can only see the firewall rules. If I just look at that, you see this? As a network admin, compute network admin, I can get only the details of firewall rule. I can only list the firewall rules, but I cannot create a firewall rule. So to create a firewall rule, the bare minimum role one should have is basically compute firewall rules create. The bare minimum you should have is compute security admin, where he can create, if you have this role, this person can do anything on firewall rules. Is that part here now, Anil? Anil B. So you can only, if you are a security admin, you can create it. Now, as a security admin, you create firewall rules with a specific tag, Now, assume I have not given you a security admin role itself, meaning you cannot create firewall rules. First of all. Now, but as if I have given you, assume I have given only compute instance admin role. Only compute instance admin role is what I have been given to you. Now, if I click on this role, can I see the firewall rules at least? I can get the firewall rules, right? I can go to the firewall rules, I can get the details. Now, as a bad guy, what I can do, I will know all the firewall rules. I see where are all the tags are there, where and all tags are there. What I will do basically, I'll find out, okay, these are the tags. If I use this tag as a compute instance admin, I can create a VM compute dot set a tag. Set tags. Yeah. As a compute instance admin, what I can do is I can simply go create a new VM, know all the tags, apply to my VM the tags, and I can misuse it. Possible, right? I can misuse it very easily. Now, instead of doing this, tags are very easy. But instead of using tags, right, what Google recommends as a best practice is create a firewall rule with always a service account. That's the best way to create a firewall rule. The reason is, if I were to use that service account, what is that role I should have, folks? Now, assume you are a person who wants to use a service account. What is that minimum role you should have? Just having a compute instance admin role will not help you out. You should have service account user role to read the service account details. Then not everybody is going to get service account user role. So this way I can block any accidental use or intentionally trying to enter the back door. So that is the reason why this article gives you a very nice picture. What is the best way? And they share the 3 best ways, and they also explain what I explained you now is what has been explained here. I read it from here only, basically. Took a good amount of time to understand this, basically. So avoid giving something at a tag, and the best feature is always to use a service account. Best feature is to use a firewall rule with service account. So I'll try to show you a demonstration next week. So create some scenario, but this is the third option. And there's also an article which I was reading yesterday. Remind me later. Something on firewall rules, best practices. And if I just show you this one, there are lots of documentation, folks. If you can read documentation, nobody can beat you. So best practices of reference architecture for your VPC stuff. So if I just go to this place, here they mention it very clearly. Here, this is the line. Even though it is possible to use tags for targeting filters in this manner, we recommend you to use service accounts where possible. Tags are not access controls and can be changed by someone with compute instance admin role, while VMs are in service. Service accounts are access controlled, meaning a specific user must be authorized to use the service account. What is the role? Service account user. That role should be there, and we are not going to give it to everybody, so they cannot misuse it. So this is the best way. You have to use the service, the firewall rule. So if you are going to do some auditing on any project, a quick way is go to your firewall rules and see if your firewall rules are using tags. If it's using tags or something like apply to all. Apply to all is a bad practice. Tags are okay, but this backdoors are there. Service account is not going to have any backdoors. That's going to be the best way. So using service account easily can find who can use tags, right? Using service account easily can find who can tags. No. Tags and service. So you can create firewall rule either using tags or service account or apply to everything. You cannot use both the combination, Mangesh. So by just using service account, it's not okay. If you want to know who is using tags, basically you have to look into the logs to find out who created a VM with a specific tag. For example, if I just go right, if I go to my activity page, I should see the logs who enabled tags. You see this set tag. Set a tag on VM. Who created it? Basically, who was the user? This user. What was the tag he set? How do I see it? This was a tag. You can see it in the logs. Who enabled tags? Maybe put a filter like get all people who did set a tag. Then you can find out and then make sure you take an action, or basically don't put tags itself. Always use service account. Okay, that's the main part here, folks. So I'll just stop here, folks. We have around 9 minutes. I don't want to rush towards the end and ask for any questions. So because I wanted to show you a demo next week on service account with firewall rule. It's very, very important. And I remember a question which was related to this. For example, I'll just share this information and stop it. It's again in the in the bookmarks. When you're doing auto scaling, right? When you're doing auto scaling with your MIG, all those things, not this one. 1 minute, folks. Firewall rules. This one, right? I remember seeing something on this kind of a question where auto scaling is turned on and you want to scale up the resources. Definitely you would have created a template, instance template. When you're creating the instance template, right, don't put a network tag, firewall related to network tag. Make sure you have for all the VMs, definitely there's going to be one service account. make sure you use that service account and create a firewall rule. That way the scalability is going to be very easy. So n number of VM scales up, you have the same firewall rule applied. So that's going to be a beautiful feature and a secure feature is what I would say. And something on this kind of lines, there was a question which I remember seeing it. So always prefer to use service account. I'll put it as this thing in the cheat sheet, but I'll show you a demonstration next week. So always have firewall rules uh, created which is targeted to a service account. Avoid tax or apply to all networks. Apply to all instances in the network. The reason you know it, I'll just put in this document. This is a beautiful document. 2 years or 3 years back document. Let me stop it here, folks. For any questions, we just started our networking concept. It was only one slide which we had, and remaining was only fully demo. To make it very clear, by doing small demos, we'll make it very clear. That was the whole intent. So any questions, folks? We have 5 minutes. If you have any questions, after 5 minutes, I'm stopped the session. Any questions so far what we did on today's topic? Any other things, I'll take it later. Thank you, Mangesh. Not aware about the networking at all. No problem. I also came from the same background. So it was only doing these lots of demos made me understand. Even yesterday, I was learning something on network. So it's pretty vast, I would say. And the only benefit is you have a system in front. You can play around like anything. Google gives you that, or any cloud provider gives you that, basically. And also my understanding was becoming better compared to the college days. Like application layer, the session layer was not very clear during the college days. After doing this kind of stuff, to some extent, it was very clear. Totally agree with you. Any questions, folks?
Mahesh, I have one question.
Yeah.
If we want to create a 3-tier application, okay, with the separation of network, means like everyone should have their own subnet. So what is the bare minimum requirement of subnet that we can go on, so that all the tiers should be separated? Sometimes being a global network, it's always confused me, because in our on-prem we need at least 3 subnets. I know.
So you have a 3-tier architecture.
Yeah.
So you have application, which is the front end. So this is your middle tier. Then it's going to be your DB, right? So if I were to do this thing kind of a stuff, right, what I would usually do is I would only have one subnetwork. One subnetwork is nothing but one region. One region, meaning my presence, my application is only in one region. So this way I can avoid egress cost, all those things. Meaning I have one VM1, which is going to have my front end. So I'm going to have VM2, assume everything is VM, and VM3 for my DB. So all are going to be in the same one subnetwork. Simple. This way, what I can do basically with the help of tags, I can make sure that VM1, which is my application tier, only interacts with VM2. VM2 only interacts with my database tier, or with my VM2 and VM3. VM3 is the middle, so it's going to interact with both. But what with my tagging I can do is VM1 should not interact with VM3. I can do that. This is what usually will be done if you have a 3-tier architecture, and this is which is in a single region. But if you want a worldwide presence kind of a stuff, what you can do basically is you can have this entire stuff. If you want to have this is in 3 regions, what you will do basically is you will go with MIG. So you will have MIGs in all 3 regions. That's going to be your application tier. Then you will also have your middle tier. Maybe there's an example which I can show you. I had a bookmarked 3-tier architecture. If I, okay, let me just show you this. It should be there in my this thing. That's a very nice diagram. So if I just show you, that's going to give, and we will talk about this. Where is my slides? So if I go here, load balancer. This is a good architecture. So users from California hit a load balancer. So you have your front end in US West 1, Central, and East. So that's 3 regions. Now those MIGs use an internal load balancer, hit the middleware, which is again in the same region. From that, you will have one more internal load balancer, which is your database. So this is one way of doing it. So you have 3 regions. But make sure the middle tier, the front end will not directly interact with your database, which can be controlled with the help of tags if you want, or also service account also is a good choice. Info security team always says subnetwork range should not be same for all tiers. Explain this also. Subnetwork range all tiers must have their own subnetwork. If you create your own subnetwork, what's going to happen, Vivek? Let me know what's going to happen if you create your own subnetwork.
No, means
So,
actually, okay, you're trying to explain. I thought you were asking a question. I'm sorry.
What I'm asking. So if you have basically here, this is my understanding. So let me just show you the network. So you are
Actually,
saying have 2 different
I'm
networks.
giving
Let
you
me
an example.
just show you the view. So if I go to my VPC, so I have 3 subnetworks. Now you are saying this should be UI, this should be middle tier, this should be DB, something like that. So
Yeah,
is what you're trying to.
all the
What's the advantage?
own dedicated IP range. Means
Okay.
yeah. So I think 3 subnet would be enough. If one VPC, 3 subnet would be enough. I think so. In that case,
What would be the purpose? I did not get it. What's the
actually,
advantage?
on-prem scenario. I'm just telling you, as in my organization, there is a infosec policy which says the subnets for each application must be separate. They getting me? One is 10.1, another should be 10.2, or another.
Why? Any reason why? They have
This is
mentioned any reason?
DMZ and non-DMZ. They used to separate IPs based on that actually.
So the thing is that certain rules may be applicable in a specific environment, something like in on-prem is my understanding. So maybe that's the reason I mentioned the networking way, how it works in GCP, right? It could be slightly different from your on-prem. So don't try to apply the same logic. Now the info security people, they would have put, there's always a reference point for everything, right? So if the reference is always on-prem, you also mentioned in on-prem, you mentioned. So don't try to apply the same logic here. I would say better what we can do is, if you still want to do the same thing, and if it's something specific in a region, what you can do thing is have 3 subnetworks all in US Central only. All in US Central only, one for web, one for middle tier, one for database. That way, if you want, it is possible. But I would say in GCP, if I have multiple subnetworks, they can communicate each other. We have seen it. So US to Singapore, it works. US to US also, it works. So just having multiple subnetworks is not going to solve your problem. But if your problem is application tier should not interact with database, you block that with the help of firewall rules using tags. That should be the approach, is what I am trying here. Because in on-prem, it could be totally different. If you could just create subnetwork, right, it will not even interact. True. But in GCP, if you just create subnetwork, it's going to still work. It's going to still work unless you explicitly block it. So firewall rule is going to be more important. Just putting two subnetworks is not going to make any difference. If your firewall rule is allowing it, just keep the firewall rule ping and SSH open. Then if you create two subnetworks, it's going to still work. You cannot do any boundaries or draw boundaries between two subnetworks in GCP. It works slightly different. That's the most important thing. And this is specifically in GCP. In other cloud, it may be something very more like your on-prem traditional style, because every VPC is regional. Google is slightly better there. It's global. That's where you will see some difference there.
Yeah, man. So just trying to learn how to negotiate with the customer. That the way you said, na, one customer was not ready to apply the organization policy to restrict default.
Yeah.
This is the our infosec team in such a way that never going to accept that one tier should satisfy. I mean, one tier would be enough for all three applications. Just try in
One
this way we
subnetwork. One
how to,
subnetwork.
yeah, one sub network. Just trying. Maybe the GCP network is totally different. Like there is
Yeah.
no other cloud. There is no on-prem funda applies in GCP. If you give
Yeah.
a guy who is 25 years of experience in network and say, oh, one subnet would be enough, then there is a difficult to convince him. Like with
Now,
one
what you
sub.
can do is, okay, what you can do is, now you can do something like this. Now, assume, let me just, what you can do basically is, let me just quickly show you this. Demo 3 tiers. So go in their lines only. Go in their lines. You are not going to lose anything. So assume this is going to be called as subnetwork app. Okay, and your region is going to be fixed. The info security team will never would have thought of region, but you would have thought of region because you are a cloud architect. So what you can do is in Singapore subnetwork app. So have a range something like 10 dot 10.9.8.0.24. This is the range. Now done. Now what I do is I create one more subnetwork middle tier. So here they told, right, should not be conflicting. I'll put it as 172.30.1.0/24. Now let me make this as app tier. The last one, subnet DB tier. DB tier again in Singapore only. The region is same, but I have 3 subnetworks. So this I'll put it in done. So I have 3 subnetworks in the same region, but different CIDR ranges. So let me just create it. Go with this approach. Now you put additional firewall rules mentioning any VMs in subnetwork app tier should only communicate with subnetwork middle tier. It should not directly go to database tier. Play around with your tags or with your service account, then you can do that block. But just with the subnetwork, it's not going to be possible. Now, if they see it, it's going to be exactly what they mentioned. They mentioned subnetwork should be different IP ranges. You fulfilled it. Now, from the GCP perspective, you basically make sure you add a firewall rule. Basically, that way you are going to fulfill their requirement also, the GCP's concept also, because you're the only person who knows on-prem to some extent, GCP to a greater extent. So you can do the bridge the gap there. This is what you can do, Vivek. Fulfilling their requirements also, your requirements also.
Oh, thank you. No, just actually in this way I can learn, or we will learn how to negotiate with a customer who is very rigid to their on-premises structure. That's why I thought that I should.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you'll see lots of customers like this. Because the only thing is that the exposure, they would not have exposed it, so you will always have this. Yeah. Any other questions, folks? Okay, folks. So if there's no more question, enjoy the rest of the day. I guess it's Holi, if I'm not wrong. People who are celebrating it, happy Holi. So enjoy your day, and we'll resume back on next Saturday with service account, using service account for our firewall rules. Okay. Thank you, folks. Thank you. Bye.